All right, welcome to MazzaMedia. I am Mark, and we are live here on Saturday afternoon. We're going to be talking about Kelsey Fitzsimmons, Appellee brief, and told myself I got to say Appellee, not appellate. I'm so used to saying appellate that I said it'd be Appellee. So we are going to talk about that today. I spent a considerable amount of time going through the PDF and highlighting the whole, like certain areas that I wanted to talk about. I was highlighting it, getting it all narrowed down. And then right before the show was going to begin, I couldn't get the PDF to scroll up and down. And all of a sudden, I hit refresh. And when I hit refresh, all of my highlights that I spent about an hour working on today are gone. The good news, though, is that I spent so much time reading it this morning that I got a pretty good idea of what I wanted to talk about anyways. Sometimes life goes that way, unfortunately, but it was wonderfully highlighted, and now not going to happen. So I think I'm going to do a Karen Reed show tomorrow. We'll see how my availability looks. I was looking at I was just going to say this actually. I was going to work out. I was going to hit the weights. I was going to go for a walk today, but I was looking at the weather and it was so rainy. I'm like, you know what? Let me just spend the morning. I'm going to have blueberries. I'm going to have yogurt. I'm going to have eggs. I'm going to sit at the computer. I'm going to listen to Brother Counsel. I'm going to review the Appellee brief. And that's what I decided to do. I'm like, I'm going to keep it cool. I'm going to do my working out a little bit later, and then I'll see what I want to do tonight. But yeah, it's a good afternoon to talk about this stuff, and it's so foggy and miserable out there today. But yeah, I'm going to get some walking going on here in a little bit. Thanksgiving's coming up very, very quick. We're days away. In fact, hit your grocery stores now for everything you need. Don't wait to get that turkey. That turkey's got to start thawing out soon. But definitely get all your stuff now, because once Monday, Tuesday hits, it's going to be the scraps. I had the heavy whipping cream incident last year where it was Thanksgiving Eve and I was trying to get heavy whipping cream, and this lady that's at the store is meandering around the same section and just wonders. And then of all the items she grabs the last one that was there. And I had to use a non-hood heavy whipping cream last year, which was a little frustrating, but I got past it, pushed past it. The other heavy whipping cream ended up being very good. We were fine. We had it on our pie and our jellos and everything else we have, which is a good time. But Thanksgiving, I love to death. Love it to death. It's a great eating holiday. Get the turkey. You got, my sister makes baklava homemade every year, which is out of this world. So many good foods that you get to eat on Thanksgiving, and then all the pies and everything else that comes with it. So it's good. I'm excited. I cannot wait. Love Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving Eve is always fun. All the sports are on. And then sometimes I go to the high school football game. Occasionally, sometimes I'll drop in late in the game to see some of my old high school buddies and all that. But yeah, I'm ready for a show today, ready to go. Glad to see all of you guys here today. This is not a fundraiser show. No, we don't have chicken wings on Thanksgiving, but we do have turkey wings. There are turkey wings that are there, and they're actually really, really good as well. Kelsey Fitzsimmons, GiveSendGo is going to be pinned to the top of the chat throughout the show, and you guys can go ahead and send money by going to that link and making a donation to her. We've raised over $10,000 through the MazzaMedia live shows with the various guests and all the people that have donated, that have contributed to helping Kelsey Fitzsimmons. And that's what we continue to do here, is to help people. And that's ultimately what the goal is to have a means of just using our ability to help somebody and raise awareness through our programs that we run, and the content, and all the viewers and everyone that supports Kelsey or Karen Reed have been exemplary in assisting folks in need, Sandra Birchmore among others, throughout time. So continue to help Kelsey, continue to help anyone you can that's near and dear to you in terms of a story that you find a strong attachment to, and help them out. And even, like a lot of people have said, even $5 goes a long way. It might not seem like much, but if you can contribute $5, contribute $5. If you can share that link, do what you got to do, or what you can do to help out Kelsey, and that's fantastic. We have raised over $1 million for Karen Reed collectively, and I believe her GiveSendGo at Kelsey is over $42,000 right now, and I know we're happy to be able to contribute to that on this program as well. And I'm not a big fan of stuffing. I have a little bit of stuffing, but I'm not a big fan of it. Turkey and mashed potatoes. We have rice pilaf in my family as well. It's homemade, and I have a lot of that. My grandmother used to make it, and we got Kelsey in court, a hearing at least on the 25th, coming up in a matter of days here. Tomorrow's the 23rd, so Tuesday. Kelsey has a hearing coming up, and it's stressful right now. It's extremely stressful because not only has she been in jail for a significant length of time, but now we're starting to roll into the holidays. It's bad enough she's locked up. It's bad enough she can't see her baby, but then you get Thanksgiving and then Christmas and all that coming up. And here I am yesterday night, all excited about Black Friday deals and what I can get. I'm like, then this morning I'm reading through the Appellee brief, and I'm just saying to myself, damn, like Kelsey doesn't get to enjoy life. Kelsey Fitzsimmons should be getting to go on Amazon, going to Target, going to all kinds of stores to buy gifts for her child and spending Thanksgiving Eve and Thanksgiving and, nice time with her child, but she doesn't get that opportunity right now. And a lot of us, if not every one of us, disagree with the judge's decision. At the very worst, she could be home, under house arrest with a GPS monitoring device, getting to spend at least Thanksgiving dinner with her parents at the very least. And that's, someone just said it right there. It's her son's first holidays, which is horrible. So I don't know what to speak to in terms of chances of release on Tuesday. I'm not gonna bank on it. You know what I mean? I'm not gonna get myself hyped up for anything like that. But I just hope that you can be out of there as soon as possible. Unfortunately, as we've seen, in a lot of cases that unfortunately there seems to be a lot more chaos than there is resolution in the terms that we wanted. We saw what Karen went through. Karen fought through absolute hell, 2 trials to finally get acquitted. And now, the civil case, is going on with the O'Keefe family. And then Karen Reed's laying the smackdown with a lot of lawsuits against various individuals there. We'll talk about probably tomorrow on this program. We'll talk about that and get into that and definitely talk about what's going on with the McAlberts and everything that's going on there. But Karen Reed is she's on the rampage in terms of making sure people that need it stuck to are getting it stuck to them. So happy about that. Happy for Karen. Happy she's prevailing. But today's show, Kelsey Fitzsimmons will be the subject, really catching up on the week. And today I spent some time reading over the brief to kind of get caught up, see what it said. I had watched Justice Served, Brother Counsel. I watched Brother Counsel today. I watched Justice Served earlier in the week. Love Justice Served's programming as well. Lawyers there and they also have, Michael Bryant on scene a lot with the microphone. So it's kind of a nice broadcasting feel to their programming. But they're giving a lot of attention to Kelsey Fitzsimmons and obviously Brother Counsel as well. And we had Mark Betterow on this program. And of course, Melanie Little as well has been covering Kelsey Fitzsimmons very much in depth. And it's great to have a lot of people out there with legal backgrounds that are invested in this story and giving it the attention it deserves. And I think that's ultimately the key to all of this, is giving things attention, making sure people know about that, and making sure that they're aware and popularizing this. And a lot of times these judges, oh, do they hate it? Oh, do they hate it? And there's even an accusation in this brief that we'll read about that talks about the judge, the Commonwealth or whatever, even saying that, it's just Bradle's way of trying to create sympathy or hype for his client, which is absolutely ridiculous. So we're going to go ahead and share this. This is not my original version of this file, unfortunately. I wish I had my highlighted version, but that is now obsolete. It is no more. It is out of here. It's gone. So that's too bad. Let me just see how this looks on the screen for you guys. It looks pretty good. Do we want to go with maybe a lower? No, we don't want to go with that view. How about this? That looks pretty good right there. That looks pretty spiffy. All right, here we go, guys. Again, Saturday afternoon. Please subscribe to this channel as well. I love when I gain subscribers because, it's just good. It just feels rewarding. People value what you put out there for content. So if you guys can subscribe, that would be fantastic. My first drink of the day in the red Solo cup commences now. Here we go. 3, 2, 1, and there we go. Yeah, and Mike Crawford has talked a lot about this on Howie Carr's, the Howie Carr Network, Grace Curley's show as well. Mike, one of the original folks that was talking about this case. He's also been in court at least once or twice to cover that case and make sure it gets the attention it needs. And it's good to see everybody from legal experts to content creators and all the supporters that have been out there showing that particular support. Law Girls Not Attorneys, shout out to them as well. They've been out there showing a lot of vested interest in this as well. So, all right, here we go, folks. Here we go. All right, so the Commonwealth of Massachusetts here. The Commonwealth is the appellee. Kelsey Fitzsimmons is the appellant. And here we go. On appeal from an order of the single justice of the Supreme Court. Brief for the Commonwealth. Paul Tucker, Marina Moriarty. This was filed in November here. All right, table of contents we will skip. I wish I had all my highlights. I can't believe that the screen messed up on me like that. Next time I'm going to save that PDF. And all right, the issue presented is that Judge McCarthy did not abuse her discretion or commit an error of law in finding the defendant dangerous and mandating conditions of release where she appropriately considered the defendant's actions in pointing a loaded firearm at a fellow police officer and pulling the trigger, coupled with an admitted history of mental illness and persistent alcohol abuse. And they're really going to try to bring this home here in their arguments that Kelsey Fitzsimmons is basically an alcoholic that's just out of control. And, she can be seen running down the street at 2 a.m. every morning with a Corona or a Bud Light in a brown paper bag. This is how insane that they try to make her out to be in this appellee brief. So the statement of the case, as you know, the defendant, Kelsey Fitzsimmons, brings an appeal from a denial of her petition to a single justice. Justice. There's the first stammer of the day. There we go. We got it out of the way. I'm getting warmed up. Pursuant to GL C20, I'll just skip that. Appealing an order of the Superior Court finding her dangerous and detaining her prior to trial. The defendant was indicted on August 25th, 2025 for one count of assault with a dangerous weapon. Now, if she pulled the gun on herself, how is that assault? Well, their argument is that she pulled it on the gun, on the fellow officer, Noonan. All right. Although there's no indication that the defendant was intoxicated, that's the key point right there. Here you go. Although there is no indication that the defendant was intoxicated when she pointed her gun at a fellow police officer who was at her home serving a restraining order. We'll stop right there. Okay. They even admit it themselves. Right here. I want to see if this is highlighting on it. Perfect. There it is. All right. There's no indication that the defendant was intoxicated when she pointed her gun at a fellow police officer. Okay. So that's kind of, for me and everybody else, the biggest argument that we've tried to make against this judge in all of this is that there is, as it says right there, they wrote it, there is no indication that the defendant was intoxicated when she pointed her gun. Now, we obviously contend that she did not point her gun, right? No question at all. We all agree. We agree with Kelsey's narrative that she pulled the gun on herself. So if there's no indication that the defendant was intoxicated, then for me, there is no justification that she should be required to do a scram test or any form of alcohol test if it is not involved in the situation at hand. They're attaching this onto it and trying to make it seem like, well, let's add this in because, she could be dangerous. So dangerous. My Flipmo squad is dangerous. It's just, come on, stop it and enough. They're trying to just justify that, oh, she's dangerous. Look out for her. And, she could drink alcohol at any time and she could be running around like she's a Grand Theft Auto character in real life. That's very egregious, that ruling. And it's absolutely ridiculous that they would even suggest that a breathalyzer or any form of alcohol testing would be needed. Because again, as they say, there is no indication that the defendant was intoxicated when she pointed her gun, which she did not point it, it's my belief, at her fellow officer. So why is she having to take a test? Why is she currently in jail right now in Chicopee, Massachusetts, 2 to 3 hours across the state when she wasn't intoxicated? I mean, that is how ridiculous this is. And this is why we're all so sick and tired of what goes on in our state. You know, it's bad enough they're charging her with trying to point a gun at a fellow officer, yet there's no indication that she was intoxicated. So now she's in jail because she can't take a breathalyzer test because she was shot. It's just, that's what we look at and we say, this is what's so ridiculous. And this is why we're here. This is why we talk about it. This is why we give money to our GiveSendGo, which is pinned to the top of the chat. All right. The Commonwealth demonstrated that alcohol fueled the precipitating violence in this case and has been a persistent issue for the defendant. All right. So they're basically saying that, okay, they're giving her the credit, you know, the benefit of the doubt. Okay, you weren't intoxicated at the time of the incident, but, you know, she has had a history of drinking alcohol, being violent, being, you know, potentially threatening here. You know, they go over all of that. But at the end of the day, it's like the movie Tommy Boy, but it's not on the box. You remember that scene in Tommy Boy? It's not on the box. Well, unless that was Black, I think it was Tommy Boy, but it's not on the box, right? If it's not on the box, quote unquote, then there should be no reason to have her take a breathalyzer test then, right? Because when you look at it, it's not on the box like in Tommy Boy would be, it's not in the charges, right? It's not in the charges. That's my argument. That's a lot of our arguments. If it's not in the charges, then that should not be a requirement of her release. That should not be, you know, they could argue for GPS monitoring, right? They could argue for house arrest, right? They can argue for that, right? And as much as I don't like that, or as much as I disagree with it, I can say, okay, I can see why they have a reasonable argument to make that statement, even though, again, I disagree with it. But what I don't understand and what I don't get and what I don't accept is the breathalyzer. That's what I don't get. That's what I don't understand. And that's what I don't accept. Because they're just saying, well, you know, she has drinking alcohol before. She has had a history of violence before, or so they're saying, right? Or so she is accused, or so in the he said, she said, that's what they're saying. But that's where I get down to the point once again where I say, how many people have drinking alcohol? How many people have gone out to clubs in Boston or New York City or Hartford, Connecticut, or Providence, Rhode Island? Nowhere in Maine, probably. But, you know, and completely just acted a fool, gotten scuffles. I mean, come on. We've all been to bars. Some of us have been to bars or clubs in Boston before in our lives. I've been to Marina Bay in Quincy. All right. I've seen people get thrown out of the place for scuffles a long, long time ago. And I stopped going there, I think, in 2012. I don't think I ever went out to a place like that again after 2012. But, you know, that's what you see out there. That's what you see. A lot of scuffles, a lot of brawls. You got bouncers tossing people, right? People get a little rowdy when they get drunk, but that doesn't mean they're an alcoholic. That doesn't mean, you know, necessarily Kelsey has DUIs left and right, numerous driving violations. She was suspended from the police force at any point for intoxication. No, many people drink alcohol. It's a perfectly normal thing to do, especially in Massachusetts, for the love of God. We got to be one of the top drinking states in the entire country, you know, and there's no question about that. But, you know, again, people drink alcohol. People get angry. People swear. Sometimes people get a little violent. But then the various levels of assault can vary, right? It could be a push, a shove, whatever. But this, at the end of the day, Kelsey does not have any charges on her history that is unbecoming of a citizen that should be law-abiding or of someone that is a police officer, right? So there's no violent history. There's nothing in her criminal record that says she's had violent history, right? There's no assault charges. There's no alcohol-related charges. There's none of this. And that's where I sit there and I say, this judge, you know, come on. How is your ruling in any way, shape, or form in line with what has been accused here? So if you want to bring up the gun thing, okay, fine. Bring up the gun thing. Bring that up. There was an incident. Okay, fine. but the alcohol stuff, trying to grandfather in the alleged history of violence, which is all he said, she said, it appears, and trying to bring that in to make your justification as to why she should have this scram testing done or alcohol testing done, it is a total ruse, in my opinion. All right. Recognizing the dangers inherent in the intersection of alcohol abuse, and mental health issues, right? The superior judge, McCarthy, fashioned reasonable terms of release, including the condition of submission to a scram test. So that's where she now implements that test that would deter the defendant from consuming alcohol. Despite having obtained her release from custody within 48 hours, the defendant was back before the court reporting that she was unable to abide by the scram condition. Therefore, the court reasonably concluded that the only way to assure the safety of the community was to place the defendant in custody. So they already have her in house arrest. She can't do the scram test. She's been shot. She's still recovering. She can't do this breathalyzer test without it being absolutely, absolutely painful. Well, the only choice is to throw her back in jail. Throw her back in the brig. Throw her back in the camp. That's all they decide to do here because she's such a threat to our society, allegedly, because of one incident and house arrest. Well, again, she's awaiting trial, right? I mean, trial hasn't happened yet. What happened to innocent until proven guilty? At the very least, house arrest. At the very most, house arrest. Let me reverse that. At the very most, house arrest. All right, so let's read this footnote real quick. No, we're good. Okay. All right, so she's Kelsey's a major threat. And she's got to be placed in custody. All right, procedural history. Let's go back to July. A complaint was issued on July 3rd, 2025, charging the defendant with assault with intent to murder and 2 counts of assault with a dangerous weapon. The defendant was arraigned on August 7th, 2025, and after a hearing was ordered held to pursuant so-and-so. I'm just going to skip all the data. There's no point in reading it. The defendant appealed the determination of dangerousness to the Superior Court, and on August 14th, 2025, the court, McCarthy included, conducted an evidentiary hearing. One day later, Judge McCarthy issued a decision upholding the finding of dangerousness and the conclusion that there were no conditions of release that could safely permit the defendant's release. Got that? Notably, the court found that it has not presented with a satisfactory release plan. Has not been presented with a satisfactory release plan. So they already talked about GPS monitoring, house arrest, all of that. She can't do the scram test. She can do urine tests. She can do a blood test. But they're just trying to make it seem like, oh, well, if she can't do the scram test, then we have no other choice but to lock her back up again. And that's where we get a little bit kind of like, what the hell is the deal here? What is the decision making? And it just seems to me, this is just my personal opinion, it just seems to me as a way to just kind of throw her back in jail as quickly as possible. There was no need of this. There were alternative measures that could have been implemented. And I also think that her dangerousness was overly assessed. If she had pulled a gun on herself, obviously she's a danger to herself in that situation. But then you have the postpartum depression argument, which I feel like that's being ignored here. That's what I also feel is being ignored, right? All right. On August 18th, 2025, the defendant filed a renewed Superior Court bail appeal with a comprehensive release plan for reconsideration. Now, they say here earlier, court found that it had not been presented with a satisfactory release plan. So they come up with the release plan, which the court ultimately denies. So they're just determining what's satisfactory or not. They're determining what they're going to accept or not. And they're just going to keep shunning Kelsey as much as possible. That's what I take away from that. That same day, the defendant was indicted for assault with a dangerous weapon, the grand jury having returned no bill on the proposed indictment, charging armed assault with intent to murder. The defendant was arraigned, and the Commonwealth filed another motion for detention. pursuant to that upcoming amount, what you see written there. The court, McCarthy judge, of course, held a lengthy hearing on August 28, 2025, after which Judge McCarthy found the defendant dangerous, but concluded she could be released with conditions. So again, she can be released with conditions. So the judge did not, at that particular point in time, have an issue with that. She can be released. So my attitude is this. If the judge can release her, because she says this here, the judge herself concluded that she could be released with conditions. The condition that's applied is the scram test, the breathalyzer test, right? So the judge ultimately, in my opinion, has basically revealed that GPS monitoring, including GPS monitoring with home confinement, right? And then it says here, except for medical and legal appointments with 48 hours notice to probation. So that is your key word right here, right? So she found the defendant dangerous, but concluded that she could be released with conditions, which allowed her to have GPS monitoring with home confinement. So the judge absolutely agrees at this point. GPS home monitoring, not an issue. She's dangerous, but she can be released with conditions. This means that home confinement works, which means, to me, she doesn't need to be in jail. She does not need to be in jail at all. Now, there's an exception here. Let's go through this. Except for medical and legal appointments with 48 hours notice to probation, right? So that means if she needs to go to the doctor to have her wounds evaluated, right? If she has an illegal appointment, she has to go to a hearing or something about family and probate court, right? She can go to that with 48 hours notice. So they're permitting her to not only be confined with GPS monitoring, but they're also allowing her to leave her home with 48 hours notice for medical and legal appointments, okay? This is the point I'm going to make here, and I know I've said this multiple times on my show, but I'm going to say it 1,000 times more. If they can allow her to leave her house for medical purposes to go see a doctor, if they can allow her to go to her legal appointments, then if she cannot do these scram tests, aka breathalyzer test, then why can't this judge just allow her to drive to a facility or be driven to a facility that does blood or urine tests? Or I believe they have the ability to send someone right to the house. So this is the contradiction for me. This is the biggest contradiction for me. She can go for medical. She can go leave for legal, but she can't go leave to do a blood alcohol or urine test to get her blood alcohol tested. We got to have her monitored at all times. That's the argument here. It's insanity. So, all right. So she can do this with no use of alcohol with monitoring by a scram device. The defendant's release was stayed pending a satisfactory home visit by probation. The defendant did not appeal. When probation returned an unsatisfactory result, the court held another hearing on November 8th, at which point the issue was resolved and the defendant was released. That's the picture that you see there on the banner for the show today. Is when she had the interview before the press with Tim Bradle, Martha Coakley, Courtney Healy was there. And she said, we're going to get, the truth will come out. All right. Before the November 8th hearing ended, the defendant requested that the GPS condition be lifted the following day to allow her to undergo a medical procedure. However, the defendant submitted no evidence in support of her motion, and the motion was denied. 2 days later, on the 10th, the defendant filed an emergency motion for immediate relief from the scram order, supported by affidavits from the defendant and her mother, and here we go, and with an accompanying email from the probation department. Judge McCarthy, this is the day of controversy here, Judge McCarthy held another hearing on September 11, 2025, where a probation officer testified about the scram procedure and the defendant's apparent difficulty breathing deeply. So you have a probation officer here, and we've talked about this many times, who's like, yeah, she can't do this test. It's too difficult for her. I can attest to this. I'm a probation officer. I'm not somebody that's trying to do favors for her. I have no part in this or hand in this other than I'm a probation officer. It does my job. I've seen what goes on. She can't do it. It's like watching somebody in the movie Saw try to fight for their life, basically. It's true. I mean, it's a torture device. So at the conclusion of the hearing, the court removed the scram requirement because she did not want to torture the defendant and remanded her to custody. So basically, she can't do the scram, can't do it. And, well, okay, we'll take away the GPS monitoring. We'll just send you right back to jail. Get her in the van, send her out to Chicopee, Massachusetts. It's like, you have to be kidding me. And I think that's what was so shocking about all this. Before the court could issue its 5-page written order later that day, the defendant filed a motion to reconsider. The court denied the motion to reconsider in an 8-page decision on September 16th, 2025. Nearly 3 weeks later, the defendant filed a petition pursuant and filed a supplemental exhibit on Monday, October 6, 2025. The Commonwealth filed an opposition, and on October 15, 2025, the single justice, Judge Dewar, issued a decision finding that Judge McCarthy did not make an error of law or abuse her discretion. Well, again, that's where I go back and I read between the lines and I look within the seams, is that I say to myself here, okay, you're saying she didn't make an error of law or abuse her discretion. Whether or not she made an error of law can certainly be debated. We can argue that back and forth. But the abuse of her discretion is where I have the argument. And my argument is that, again, to the point I made moments ago on this show, if you're allowing her to leave her house under GPS monitoring for medical and legal purposes, why can't you allow her to leave the house to take blood alcohol tests on a daily basis? What's happening here is, this is the issue that I have, I think, too, is the court system has, and I'm not talking about the judge here, I'm talking about the court system. The court system, from a technological standpoint, has basically reached a decision that, this is not specific to this case, has reached a decision that the scram test technologically is the way to go, right? Somebody is under house arrest, you give them the scram test, right? You do scram monitoring or whatever, right? You do that. Like, that's what they do. It's kind of like the one-size-fits-all means of handling a situation. So if you've committed a robbery and you're under house arrest, or if you've violated probation and you're under house arrest, I don't know, whatever you want to come up with. If you allegedly stole a car and you're under house arrest, whatever you might be under house arrest for, whatever you can come up with, alleged assault, whatever. Well, if you had a violent outburst at a bar and you had blood, a DUI or blood alcohol, whatever, you were drinking, whatever the hell you want to think of that's going to consequent house arrest. They're just going to throw that scram test for you. You're going to do a scram test at home. You get a GPS monitor. We're going to give you the breathalyzer. That's kind of like the one size fits all. Okay, fine. Like that's cool. I guess that's like easy to do because people don't have to leave the house more than they need to. They don't need to send anybody to the house. Great. You can do this scram breathalyzer. It's nice and simple. It's digitally accommodating to the court. It's easy for the person that's under house arrest. Perfect. It all makes sense. Easy peasy. Not a problem, right? But the issue is here is you occasionally have someone that's under house arrest that is physically unable to do that test without extreme pain, right? And that particular technological device is being applied to them, and now they have to complete that test, even though physically it's extremely difficult for them to do. So they're using a one size fits all matter. It's like if you had no ankles. I'm sorry to be so extreme here. It's like if you had no ankles. Okay, and you're like, well, we can't put the GPS monitoring system on your ankle, and we're not going to put it on your wrist or bicep or tricep. So we're just going to send you to jail. So basically, what this means is, and what I'm getting at, is Kelsey. They're applying a test that is not accommodating to every single person in every single situation, right? This is not a test that everybody can do. Kelsey is one of those people that's not able to do that, right? And as a result, because the court specifically wants to use a breathalyzer test, they are not, and there's no other technology available to allow her to be under house arrest and use any other means of testing that could have the technological level of ability to report back to the court what the judge wants. Kelsey is now in jail because technology does not exist or is not being implemented by the court that could allow her to be under house arrest right now. See what I'm saying? So this is a technological matter as far as I'm concerned, because she's not in a situation where she can complete a test on a technological basis. And because the court is technically limited from providing alternatives that could have the same level of technological convenience as the Scram test, Kelsey Fitzsimmons, therefore, has to sit in a jail cell as a result. Am I wrong about that? I mean, is that a good assessment or what? But that's how I look at this. So Kelsey's in jail because the technology is not in place. It's like saying, well, we're going to send somebody to jail because they couldn't go on the internet, except it's the year 1988 and the internet doesn't exist. Well, you go to jail, and then when you're able to log on, we'll let you out. But yet the internet's not going to be around for a long time to the general public. This is how ridiculous this is. Well, we can't allow her to do a blood test. We can't allow this, and that. It's insanity. But it's that technology. You're penalizing someone because the technology isn't there. You don't have a technological alternative. You have a blood alcohol alternative, but you don't have a blood alcohol testing alternative that has the technology to put Kelsey in a situation where she can remain in her house with GPS monitoring. And that's the issue. Why should Kelsey have to pay the consequences for physical issues and being unable to perform a mandated test? It's just, again, it's like somebody said, the justice system's always 10 years behind. This is what's getting me worried about AI technology. And there was a joke made in a video the other day where people were being framed for things they hadn't done because AI videos were being used. I mean, can you imagine if an AI video was made of Karen Reed backing into John O'Keefe, or an AI video came out of Kelsey Fitzsimmons pointing and trying to shoot a gun? You know what I'm saying? Can you imagine, like, in 5 to 10 years, if AI videos come out and it shows, like, say you, for example, doing something. Oh, you allegedly did this, and here's the video, and it's an AI video, but yet your case is placed before a judge that can't tell it's AI, and there's nobody there to absolutely verify that it's AI. Like that, like in Spider-Man 3, Eddie Brock was trying to frame Spider-Man, and all his photos were fakes. And then they had the photos actually reviewed to confirm that they were photographic forgeries, and ultimately determined it was a photographic forgery. But with AI technology, in 10 years, is there going to be somebody else like Karen Reed or Kelsey Fitzsimmons and AI technology submitted to the court saying, yeah, here's the Ring video, and it's an AI video, and it's not real, and the judge doesn't know that it's not real, and they're just locking people up left and right. That honestly, look, in terms of AI technology and true crime or criminal situations, this is going to be a major threat in the coming years in our country and our world, this AI technology. Anybody can look, there's just a video online earlier today that was taking celebrities and putting them in a hypothetical movie based on a video game. And at first, when you look at it, it looks like Michael B. Jordan. It looks just like him. But then as soon as you look at it, it's like, wait, that's not real. But AI technology right now is in its 1990s. AI right now in 2025 is the equivalent of the internet in 1995 right now. The internet in 1995, comparable to 2005 or 2015, or even now, is significantly outdated. In 10 to 20 or 30 years, AI technology, which is just really in its early stages, is going to be astronomically advanced in the time to come here. And people could be getting framed for murder. There could be a case. Snapshot this clip and play it 10 years from now. MazzaMedia said it first, right? I'm not trying to hype myself. I'm trying to say You're going to see an AI case in 10 years where somebody's framed for a murder or a crime using AI video. They can take anybody's face, slap it in an AI image, and bam, there it is. There it is right there. And that's a very scary thing. I mean, it really, really is. And my concern is that even though we, the public, will understand what's AI and what's not AI, is that you're going to have judges that are not going to understand this. And they're just going to say, well, let's just throw him in jail and put him in jail for 60 days because of dangerousness. This video absolutely frightened me of what this defendant did. And we're going to put them in jail for 60 days because of this video. That's, I mean, look, you look at how many, like that fake video that came out of Karen Reed and Alan Jackson. That one where they were allegedly out at a club and Alan Jackson had his arms around. Remember that? That's the kind of stuff that you're starting to see. And people were trying to disprove that left and right, and it was fake. But this is the level of bullshit that's going to go on, you know? And that's what's really kind of frightening from a technological standpoint. And my concern is courts need to be able to assess that going forward in the future, that they can make sure they have protection and means for the public. Because the last thing I want to see is a video come out, and then you have a lawyer like Tim Bradle trying to defend his client and saying, Your Honor, my client didn't do this. This is clearly an AI video. Then your judge, who just doesn't get the technology, is like, well, I'm looking at this video, Attorney Bradle, and what I'm seeing here is your client is doing a lot of crimes in that video, and I'm considering him dangerous. And Bradle will be like, but Your Honor, this is obviously and clearly an AI video. If you look at the video, the body is not the same body type that my client has. Well, that remains to be seen. Your Honor, you know, this goes like this. Your Honor, we're arguing that the court, before they make any decisions, first assesses the video to determine that it is AI. You know, but look at that. Hypothetically, right there, to end my little skit there, that's exactly what could be happening in the court system in years to come. That's what lawyers are going to have to be battling through in the years to come. And if Kelsey Fitzsimmons, Aiden Carney, and Karen Reed are any kind of example of what people like them in the future could be facing, I mean, come on. I mean, that's exactly what could be happening here. And it's scary, you know, because AI technology will be a lot more modernized in 10 years. A lot of them now, you watch them, they look fake. You can tell, okay, that's fake. The characters the guy on the screens get 2 left arms, for goodness sakes, you know. But in 10 years, who knows how touched up that technology is going to look. And that's kind of scary, especially when you have judges sometimes that aren't getting it, you know, and they're making decisions that are impacting people's lives, and they're not getting it. Okay. Rant over. Had to get that out of my system. All right. The Commonwealth filed an opposition, and on October 15th, the single justice issued a decision finding that Judge McCarthy did not make an error of law or abuse her discretion. The defendant petitioned for review by the full bench on October 27, 2025, and the court ordered additional briefing on November 4th. The parties returned to the trial court on November 25th for scheduling of a trial date. The Commonwealth anticipates being ready for trial in January 2026. So there you go, folks. Coming this week, that's the scheduling of the trial date in trial court. All right. Summary of facts, statement of facts before Judge McCarthy. Contrary to the defendant's claim, the facts of the underlying allegation are hotly contested. At approximately 6 p.m. on June 30th, Lieutenant Sean Daly, Officer Patrick Noonan, and Officer Houston of the North Andover Police Department responded to 125 Phillips Brook Road to serve the defendant with a restraining order. The defendant, a North Andover police officer, resided at that address with her fiance, Justin, and their 4-month-old infant. Earlier that day, Justin, I'll just say Justin instead of his last name, Justin had sought, that same day, was granted an abuse prevention order out of Essex Probate and Family Court. Justin alleged that the defendant physically assaulted him over the previous weekend and that he was in fear of her and for the safety of his child. All right. He stated that the defendant had assaulted him in the past. So I'm going to get back to that. And feared that the defendant would hurt herself and the child if he were to leave. So This is my contention with this. Is he states like, okay, she assaulted him over the weekend. And then he says the defendant assaulted him in the past. Well, what I want to know, and this is constructive here, this is not, I am not trying to attack Kelsey Fitzsimmons' opposition here. But what I am arguing, and my contention is did Justin ever file any complaints with the police department that he had been assaulted by her, either for that weekend or at a previous time? That's what I want to know, and that's what I want to see, because what he's done is a very, very official means of action, right? He has gone to the family and probate court. He has made allegations of physical assault. He says that he is in fear of her and for the safety of his child. Well, if this is all going on, has he ever gone to the cops? Has he ever gone to the police department and say, hey, I'm being assaulted, she's abusing me? You know, things like that. Along with serving the order, the officers intended to remove the defendant's firearms from the residence and transfer custody of the child to Justin. After arriving at her home, the officers informed the defendant about the restraining order, advising her that here it comes, she was required to relinquish her firearms and to give Justin the baby. Now, this is where a couple things come in that we've argued before. Well, I'll talk about the firearms in a little bit, actually, but we'll talk about the baby for a second. Where's child services in all of this? Where is child services in all of this? Why are they not present, right? So the defendant tells the officers that her firearms were locked in a safe in the basement. Now, this is where we argue. Why do they not remove her from the home? Approximately 10 minutes after the officers, this is what they're saying, right? They're saying the defendant told the officers that her firearms were locked in the safe in the basement. I don't know if Kelsey really said that. I don't know if they're just saying she said that. Approximately 10 minutes after the officers arrived at the residence, they called Justin to gather his belongings and take custody of the infant. All right. In anticipation of Justin taking the baby, the defendant gathered items, clothing, diapers, bottles from around the house. Officers, here it comes. Officers Houston and Noonan escorted her between rooms. Now, this is where I see a major contradiction. And I'm going to point this out to you guys. Okay. I want you to go back here with me. And I want you to look at this. And look at that right there. The defendant told the officers that her firearms were locked in a safe in the basement. Okay. So we can all agree that the defendant told the officers that her firearms were locked in a safe in the basement. Okay, ready? Now here we go. Officers Houston and Noonan escorted her, that's Kelsey, between rooms. After gathering bottles and diapers on the first floor, so here it comes, ready? After gathering bottles and diapers on the first floor, the officers escorted the defendant to the second floor so that she could get baby clothes. All right, let's stop right there because this is my point. She told them that the gun or guns, firearms, were in the basement. These officers proceed to escort her on the first floor and the second floor. Let me ask you the following question. If you're going to a house to take a baby away from an officer, or taking the baby away from an officer/mother that you know has guns, that you know has firearms, wouldn't you first attempt? Because again, they asked her she asked where the firearms are, right? Here it is. The officers informed the defendant about the restraining order, advising her that she was required to relinquish her firearms. Right there it says it. She was required to relinquish her firearms. She told them they were locked in the basement. Then these officers escort her on floor 1 and floor 2. Why in the world did these officers not first secure the weapon in the basement? And why did they not ask her if there were any other weapons or firearms in the house at all? They, at this point, have never gone to the basement to get those firearms at all. They just start escorting her around the house. Up floor 1, floor 2, let's go around, and that kind of makes me think one thing. Did Kelsey really say it, those firearms were in the basement? Or did she say that they were in any other part of the house? Or did they just make that up afterwards? I'm speculating, but did they just make that up afterwards? Did they just say afterwards that, oh, the firearms are, she said the firearms were in the basement because, we would have never escorted her to the first floor or the second floor, blah, blah, blah. But I would say to this, why have the officers not acquired? The first thing they should be doing, there's a baby involved. You intend to bring in the fiance who has placed the restraining order. Why are you not removing any firearms from the house, at least in areas that are known to be in the house, as soon as you get there, right? Now, firearms, the amount of firearms that somebody owns are typically known if they're registered firearms, right? If they're police issued, they know what firearms she has. If she has any guns that she personally owns, they have to be registered. And they would have a means to know that if she owned 2 9mm and she owned a shotgun and she owned a rifle, if she owned an AR-15, for goodness sakes, they would know the amount of firearms that she owns in the house, unless they were unregistered, which I doubt. So they would know how many. So if they knew that she had police issued handgun or whatever other firearms in the house, they would know if it was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6. They would know if she had 10 of them. They would already know that going into the house. So they would go to the basement. They would find the amount of firearms that they know that she has. They would take those firearms, bring them out of the house, then proceed to bring Kelsey around the house to collect bottles and everything else that she needs to collect, that she needs to relinquish, including the child. But they don't do that. They don't do that here. They're escorting her around the first floor and second floor because here's the thing. Let's just say this for argument's sake. Let's say that Kelsey did say it was the basement. Let's say that Kelsey did lie about that. Let's say she did. Right? Well, they don't know if she's lied or not if they first don't search the basement to know if she was telling the truth. So this is where the police make an error, in my opinion, based on my understanding of what I'm reading, is why didn't they locate the firearms first and say, okay, she has 2 of them. Okay, we went to the basement. There's the safe. There's 2 of them. She maybe gave them the code to unlock the safe. There's 2 of them. Done. That's it. Okay, there's 2 of them. Now all of a sudden the firearms are completely out of this situation now. Now there's no pulling a gun to her head. There's no pulling guns on officers. All that is now totally removed from the situation because you have a child, an infant in the house at this time. You got to protect the kid. The first order of business here is to secure the firearms in such a situation like this, especially when you're entering the home of someone who has sufficient firearm trainings enough to be a police officer at a town level. So they should have secured those firearms first. And that's the ultimate argument. And that cannot be argued enough, that the police have a level of responsibility in protecting themselves and also protecting Kelsey and protecting, of course, first and foremost, the infant child inside of the home. They do none of that. None of that. But let's go to the first floor and second floor and collect bottles and stuff because, Kelsey told us that the firearms were in the basement. Now, even if this is a home of another person, let's say the cops entered a home of another person. Let's just say that this person had a known history of violence and violence with firearms. They'd probably be in jail anyways at that point. But still, why would you not secure the firearms first? Make it make sense. Make it make sense. All right. They gather the first floor, second floor, the baby clothes. Well, they're on the second floor, Justin and the defendants. Okay, here we go. Well, they were on the second floor. Justin and the defendant's mothers arrive at the house, right? When the defendant heard Justin, she asked Officer Houston to keep him away from her. To maintain order, Officer Houston left the defendant and Officer Noonan on the second floor and went to monitor Justin as he gathered belongings in the basement. So now, ladies and gentlemen, they have now allowed Justin and his mother to enter a home that knowingly has firearms in it in a very, very hostile situation, potentially, and they still have not removed the firearms from this fucking house. This is what am I reading this wrong here? Am I completely not getting this? Am I totally wrong about this right now? Because this is how this appears to be reading right now. Because they're not documenting that the firearms were removed from the house at all here. They haven't removed it. These officers have gone in the house. They're moving Kelsey floor to floor. They've allowed Justin and his mother to enter the house. Now they're endangering Justin's life and his mother's life, whether you like him or not. They're endangering more lives now. And immediately you see what Kelsey says here, allegedly by this report. She asked Officer Houston to keep him away from her. That obviously declares that there's hostile tension there in a hostile situation where a baby's being removed from the house. So the officers split up now. So now Kelsey has successfully got these officers, or these officers have successfully isolated themselves, placing Officer Noonan in a one-on-one situation with Kelsey. All right. Lieutenant Daly remained on the first floor. Oh, wait a sec. Let me reread this. I might have missed something here. To maintain order, Officer Noonan left the defendant, Officer Noonan, on the second floor, and Houston went to monitor Justin as he gathered belongings in the basement. Okay. Did he look for a firearm safe, Officer Houston? Lieutenant Daly remained on the first floor with the defendant's mother, Justin, and Officer Houston. Minutes later, he heard Officer Noonan on the second floor yell, "Kelsey, don't do it. Kelsey, don't do it," followed by 2 gunshots. He ran upstairs and rendered first aid to the defendant, who had been shot once in the abdomen, and requested the ambulance to the scene. Lieutenant Daly observed a firearm where the defendant was lying and moved it to the bed. So here's the argument here that I want to make. What these officers should have done, because they have screwed the pooch on this entire thing. What they should have done is if they had gone to the basement, looked for the firearms, because they're claiming that she lied. They're claiming Kelsey lied about where the location was of those firearms. If that's the case, they would have gone down to the basement and saw for themselves that that safe's not there. Or if they were able to access that safe with her giving the code or lock code or key, they would have been able to open it and see if the amount of firearms that they know to be in the house are there or not. If there's 2 in the house and only one's in that safe, then another one must be in the house elsewhere, right? They don't do that. They don't do that at all. They would know this if they went down to the basement and checked to see if the safe was there, if firearms were in it, and if so, how many firearms were in the safe. Ladies and gentlemen, I am not a police officer. Ladies and gentlemen, I am not a trained police officer. Ladies and gentlemen, I know this, and why did the cops not do this? These are the arguments that I'm making here today. But this is a situation that drives me absolutely insane. And yes, this is a great point here. People lie to the cops all the time. That's why cops are trained to secure the weapon. Now, Kelsey being a cop is no situation. Well, we were in a full sense of security because we know Kelsey. We know Kelsey. But yeah, that doesn't mean you're treating her like a civilian right now and not like a fellow officer, because this is involving a restraining order, removal of weapons, removal of a child. So there is no argument to suggest that she is your fellow officer. Even though she is your fellow officer, this is a domestic situation that you are handling. And when you handle a domestic situation, you must handle it to the means that a domestic situation must be handled. And that's my argument, is why are you not securing the gun? I can't say this enough. Why are you not securing the firearms immediately? Assessing the whole house. That's the first order of business. We're going to go in the house. We're securing firearms. Once we secure firearms, we'll do everything else, afterwards. All right. Officer Noonan explained that he was briefly alone with the defendant on the small second floor. The defendant was kneeling on the floor in her bedroom, folding laundry for the baby. While standing in the doorway, now the doorway, there's an argument about whether or not there's a door, where Officer Noonan observed the defendant face him, lunge behind the door. People say there is no door. There's also photos that prove this. And reappear pointing a firearm directly at him. The defendant pulled the trigger and heard a click. Oh, what a chance. What are the chances of that? She pulled the trigger and they heard a click, but no round fired. It's just, it's a miracle. You know, the defendant began to stand up as Officer Noonan pulled his firearm out of its holster. As the defendant attempted to rack her firearm to chamber a round, Officer Noonan gave several commands, including drop the gun and don't do it. Believing she was trying to kill him, Officer Noonan fired once. As the defendant continued trying to chamber a round, Officer Noonan fired a second round, striking the defendant. And I find this very, very far-fetched. And the most far-fetched portion of this is the round not happening to fire. Then she tries to chamber a second round. I find this extremely far-fetched. I really do. Why would she attempt to shoot Noonan? Why would she attempt to do that? Superior Court 58A hearing. At the 58A hearing in the Superior Court on August 28, 2025, the Commonwealth submitted the state police report detailing the above facts. The Commonwealth also submitted an affidavit filed in support of a 209A restraining order filed in the probate court by Justin on June 30th, 2025. The affidavit outlined that the defendant was heavily intoxicated and physical with others during an incident in Maine on or about June 28th, 2025, which was described as the defendant's bachelorette party. Okay. Has anybody here ever been to a bachelor party or a bachelorette party where you drank alcohol? You don't have to admit it if you don't feel comfortable. As the 209A order was issued from the probate court, a judge found that there was a substantial likelihood of immediate danger or abuse to Justin. The materials submitted by the Commonwealth, also written statements made by Justin and other people who were present during the incident in Maine on June 28th and the incident on June 30th. Through these statements, witnesses described the defendant as intoxicated, drinking heavily, and engaging in aggressive behavior towards numerous individuals during the June 28th incident. The statements also referenced prior similar by the defendant. The defendant argued that she should not be found dangerous and moved that she should be admitted to a personal recognizance or reasonable bail under the condition under Section 57 of the bail statute. Defense counsel submitted reports from a doctor on the psychiatry. It's going too quick. Reading too many big words. Dr. Nizovic, a doctor on the let's skip it if I can't even do it, folks. Can't do it. Let's say psychiatry. Psychiatry. There we go. Got it. Took 10 chances, but I got there. Service at Massachusetts General Hospital. And Dr. Zeisel, a licensed forensic psychologist. Based on the material submitted by the defense, Dr. Nizovic opined that the defendant no longer met the Section 12 criteria, being a harm to herself or others, and is appropriate for outpatient care once medically stabilized, discharged. Through their motion, defense counsel requested that the court issue appropriate orders in the interest of justice set forth above. So you have these doctors, psychiatrically related doctors, that are basically saying she is no longer Section 12, right? And additionally, she's no longer a threat to herself or others, right there. So that's a big statement, and it's coming from doctors that are saying this particular stuff. So that's very much these are reliable sources, and it's just, again, I feel like the judge is ignoring this aspect that they, just let her be free, let her go home, let her wait to stand trial, let this play out in the trial courts, Now, however, as Judge McCarthy noted, the defense did not submit any documentation regarding the defendant's physical medical condition as part of the dangerousness hearing. Not a single medical record or affidavit from a treating physician were submitted in either hearing related to the 58A District Court motion nor the Superior Court hearing. After argument from the Commonwealth, I just read the footnote there, just so you know. After argument from the Commonwealth and defense, Judge McCarthy found that the defendant was a danger based on the above alleged facts, her history of mental illness, and the defendant's out-of-state record, including public intoxication and disruption. So the judge is just finding anything she can here, in a sense, in my particular opinion. Yeah. But recognizing the change in circumstance from the district court 58A bail review, where the defendant was also charged with assault with intent to murder, Judge McCarthy found that there were conditions of release that would provide the necessary protection to the community. Wow. Including GPS home confinement, residing with their mother and stepfather, and compliance with mental health treatment, and abstaining from alcohol with scram testing. The defendant's release was stayed pending a satisfactory home review by probation. All right, let's go to the footnote here. As a part of their piecemeal litigation, defense counsel filed a medical notice to the court on September 5th, 2025, which was simply a filing by defense counsel and was impounded by the court. The defendant filed a letter signed by a medical doctor on September 15th after the defendant had been remanded to custody and after the defendant filed the motion to reconsider. The one-page letter summarized the defendant's injuries and supported the claim that deep breathing may be painful, but did not indicate that deep breathing would hinder the healing process. All right. After reviewing the CARI reports of the residents of the defendant's proposed place of release, the court ordered a further hearing. On September 8th, the court released the defendant according to the previously ordered conditions, but before the hearing even ended, the defendant sought an order to relieve her of the GPS device for the following day to attend a medical procedure. However, the defendant did not submit any evidence that the defendant could not wear a GPS device during the procedure. The court therefore denied the request. Take a little breather here. 2 days later, on September 10th, the defendant filed an emergency motion for immediate relief from the scram order. So, alcohol and physical aside, they have the doctors that can speak to her psychologically, how she is psychologically, that she's really no threat from a psychological standpoint. I'm struggling with these psychology words today. I do not know why. I apologize, folks. So psychologically, she's not a threat. Alcohol, she's drinking occasionally. You know, any level of violence has been hearsay or he said, she said. They're stacking the deck. All right. So the emergency motion for immediate relief from scram orders provided. The defendant claimed that she was unable to do the testing without experiencing severe abdominal pain and dizziness, and claimed with no medical support that the breathing impairs healing of her broken ribs and punctured lung. Because breathing into the scram device was physically impossible, the defendant could not comply with this order. The defense moved that it be vacated, right? She can't physically do it. We want to vacate it. What does the judge do? Oh, you want to vacate it? Fine. We'll vacate it. We'll send your client to jail. That was her ruling. The motion was unsupported by any medical evidence. We'll get to that. This will get to that. But attached an affidavit from the defendant and her mother, and here we go, and an email from the Assistant Chief Probation Officer, Jeff January, also known as P.O. January. So they got at least some sources there. Judge McCarthy held a hearing the next day, September 11th, and made abundantly clear her perspective on alcohol testing. Yeah, she certainly did, didn't she? When defense counsel framed the issue as a simple adjustment of terms, the court disagreed. And that's my big argument with the court on this. It is an adjustment of terms. The court goes, oh, we're just going to disagree. Why not? Why not blood or urine? Why not? You wanted to do blood alcohol testing. We're willing to do that. Judge wouldn't do it. She says, quote, I don't see it that way. I'm telling you, it's not a simple adjustment. One of the reasons she was released and one of the reasons to ensure the safety of the community was for her to be alcohol free. But again, Your Honor, there's no alcohol related charges here. It's basically like putting every single person in the world under house arrest and submitting them to alcohol testing, even though they have no alcohol related charges at all. None. There's nothing in any police reports. There's nothing that suggests this. But alcohol, but alcohol, but alcohol. If she cannot do that or will not do it, that changes everything, the judge goes on to say. Defense counsel argued that although the defendant could pass the test, right, because she could pass the test, it was only with difficulty. At the court's discretion, probation officer January was sworn, and he described the defendant's performance on the scram tests. He also observed that the defendant appeared to be in genuine pain during the setup process, and for that reason did not believe that failures to complete scheduled tests were willful violations of probation. The court also accepted the defendant's scram history as evidence. So there you go. The probation officer is vouching for her, and there's a level of accuracy there. The Commonwealth presented no evidence, but reiterated how important that the Commonwealth's belief is in light of the court releasing the defendant that testing be done. After confirming that the defense had nothing further to present, the court heard argument from defense counsel. He reiterated that the test was only possible with significant pain and dizziness and having to recover for several hours. He argued that there's other ways to do this if the court wishes to have her tested for alcohol, lack of alcohol. That's completely fine with the defense, but just the means that's employed is kind of a torture device for her, cruel and unusual punishment, and a potential Eighth Amendment violation. However, contrary to his assertion here, defense counsel did not, this is what they're saying back to defense counsel did not offer any alternative methods of testing. So see, that's my argument with this whole Commonwealth brief. One second. They say here, contrary to his assertion here, defense counsel did not offer any alternative methods of testing. Why is the burden on defense counsel to offer alternative methods of testing, right? They say, contrary to his assertion, everything that he says above, right, about alcohol, it's a torture device, it's cruel and unusual. Contrary to his assertion here, defense counsel did not offer any alternative methods of testing. So they're basically saying they didn't mention blood, they didn't mention urine, but also it's kind of like they're putting the burden on them to basically be like, well, you just basically walked into court and you said she can't do the scram device. And the judge said, well, if you can't do the scram device, then we're going to have to send her back to jail. So they're trying to make it seem like the judge did nothing wrong. The judge has done nothing wrong at all. The judge just said, well, Tim Bradle said she couldn't do it. So what we did here was we said blah, blah, blah. That's what they're trying to argue. They're trying to argue this right now. But it's not on Bradle to sit here and say, hey, he's like, you can't, obviously he said they can't do it. I think I actually read it earlier. And as Charlie J. Lynn says it here, he did many times. Absolutely. And to that point, they already know that there's alternative tests that can be done. So why not employ that? Why not regulate that? And there's like, well, he didn't offer any alternative methods of testing. He didn't suggest it. The judge is a judge. This is not the first time this judge has had these discussions in other cases. Any judge that's been a judge for a while has obviously been in this situation before. I'm more than sure more than once. But what are the alternatives? Because we want blood alcohol testing. Okay, there's more than one way to do blood alcohol testing, right? You can do breath, blood, or urine, right? The judge could have just brought it up. They're trying to kind of recuse the judge of responsibility here by saying, well, the judge, they didn't really contend it. I just don't buy that argument. I think it's a weak argument by them. The court took a recess before issuing a decision. I have reviewed everything again that's been submitted to me, and I'll state for the record that Fitzsimmons has moved twice in a 3-day period to amend her conditions of release. So this is the judge now. I'm going to start from the beginning. Let's restart this here. I've reviewed everything again that's been submitted to me, and I will state for the record that Fitzsimmons has moved twice in a 3-day period to amend her conditions of release. On neither occasion has she submitted any medical evidence to support her claims. I'm going to stop right there because that really grinds my gears, to quote Family Guy. Has not submitted any medical evidence to support her claims. That's what kind of really drives me insane, because of the following reason. They know she was shot. You know she was shot. She doesn't need to submit any medical evidence. I mean, it's good that she does, but that shouldn't even factor into the judge's decision here. Welcome, Rhonda. The imposition of conditions is the court's order, after careful consideration of the evidence, to fashion the least restrictive conditions that will reasonably assure the appearance of the defendant and the safety of all other persons in the community pursuant to general laws, blah, blah, blah. Just days ago, the court concluded that the condition of remaining alcohol-free and submitting to scram monitoring was necessary to ensure the safety of the community. Now, again, Kelsey Fitzsimmons was never a known threat to the community. These officers entered her home and didn't first secure the weapons in her house, did not first secure the firearms in her house. It is the police officer's responsibility to do that. If they were going to the house to seize firearms, then they should have done that first. And if that was done first, this would have never happened. All the stuff we're talking about, it would have never come to this. But they're putting the burden on her because apparently now she's a threat to the community. And again, she pulled the gun on herself, not on the officers, per her own statement, per her own admittance. After a thorough review of all arguments and submissions by the Commonwealth and Fitzsimmons, that conclusion remains unchanged, regardless of Fitzsimmons' claimed physical limitations. Based on an affidavit submitted by Fitzsimmons' mother, the testimony of an assistant chief probation officer, Jeff January, about his observations of Fitzsimmons' apparent pain during the scram installation, and the representations of Fitzsimmons' counsel, that it would be cruel and unusual punishment, torture, to continue to require Fitzsimmons to comply with the condition of being monitored by scram. The court concludes that Fitzsimmons cannot abide by the condition of being monitored by scram. Without this condition, which ensures that she does not consume any alcohol, the court cannot assure the safety of the officer Noonan and all other persons in the community. Accordingly, the court's prior order of release is vacated, and Fitzsimmons is ordered to be held without bail pursuant to mass laws, and a written order will follow. Footnote, although the defendant disparages Judge McCarthy in his brief and his attempts to characterize her behavior as injudicious and short-tempered, the transcript reveals that she presented the defendant with every opportunity. I disagree. I just think this is totally ridiculous. It is. It's just ridiculous. They're making it seem like, oh, she's just going to go wild in the streets and go crazy going after everybody. Why? Because she was shot? Why? Because the officers didn't first secure this. This would have never come to a shooting incident if they had secured the firearms first. But there's no, she bears all the burden for the officer's negligence in this. This police department's at fault here. If you're serving an order like that, you're taking a child without social services or child protective services, you're taking away her firearms, you're implementing a restraining order. Why aren't you securing? I just can't get over that. I never even thought about that as much as I've thought about it in the depth that I've thought about it today. You're escorting her floor to floor. You're letting Justin and his mother in the home. There's a baby in the home. And you guys haven't first secured every firearm in the house first? And then when suddenly a shooting happens, you're alleging that she pulled the gun and then one of your officers shoots her? This police department fucked up. Pardon my French. This is what come on. If I'm chief of police, what do you mean you didn't secure the firearms first? There was a shooting in the house and you guys were applying a restraining order, was going to take a baby away. You didn't secure the firearms first. Well, Chief. We didn't know that there was another firearm upstairs. It's like, shut up. And the thing is, Officer Noonan, if Kelsey, I don't believe Kelsey did, but if Kelsey had, Officer Noonan could have got shot and killed over this. then what's stopping Kelsey from getting in a shootout with anybody else in the house? You know, this is not to, I'm not trying to incriminate Kelsey here. What I'm saying is if Kelsey's what they say she was, then that's the threat that she would have been to them. If that's because the judge is saying she's a threat to the community, they're saying she's a threat. And if she was such a threat, then why not secure the firearms? Because God forbid she shoots and kills Officer Noonan, then who else is she going to shoot and kill? If you're a police officer and you're a police department, you secure the firearms first to protect everyone involved. You don't not secure the firearms, then you allow Justin, who's securing the firearms, to be in the house where his life could now be at stake, where the baby's life. The restraining order explicitly states that Justin feels that Kelsey was going to hurt him or the baby. And if that's true, which I don't believe, but hypothetically, that's what the officers are serving here, is they're serving this based on Justin's claims in his restraining order, then you're allowing Kelsey to be a threat to everybody. That's what you're doing. And that's why these officers screwed the pooch on this entire operation, is they put multiple lives at stake, including Kelsey Fitzsimmons here. And that's why I'm so angry, because these cops are the reason for all of this. They should have showed up, done what they needed to do, secured Kelsey contained her to the living room, located the firearms, removed the firearm from the house, and that's it. Once you secure the firearms, you've secured the scene. And whether or not they have child services, whether or not they allow Justin and his mother in the home or not, at the very least, you've secured the house. You've secured the house from threats. And as it turns out, Kelsey Fitzsimmons, who had postpartum depression, turned the gun on herself. And was now, if there had been nobody in that room, she would have shot and killed herself, more than likely. This police department must be held accountable for the situation that they caused here. They put Kelsey in danger. They put their officers in danger. They put the baby in danger. And love him or hate him, they put Justin and his mother in danger. Multiple people were put in danger in this situation because of a failure by that police department to carry out this situation properly. This is a total disaster. A total disaster. And then obviously Kelsey pulls the gun, puts it to herself, and it's my belief that they turned it and said, oh yeah, she pulled the gun on us, and we had to shoot her. And now Kelsey's in a prison cell, jail cell, in Western Mass as a result of this. This situation could have been handled so much better. So much better. And Kelsey, at the very least, would have turned everything over and would have never had an opportunity to pull a firearm on herself. And at the very least right now, she'd be sitting at home with a restraining order, simply battling for her child. And that's why I blame the police department in this whole situation. No matter what opinion you have of Justin, the police, whatever happened between Justin and Kelsey is between them, right? That should be fought between them in court. That should be fought in family and probate court. That should be argued there. And that's all this should be at the end of the day, folks. It should be Justin versus Kelsey for possession or shared custody of their child. That's all this Kelsey Fitzsimmons thing should have ever been. Is a restraining order that was issued and a custody battle. That's all this should have ever been. Nothing more. We would have never even had to have talked about this case. But because the police department didn't handle this properly and allowed this whole thing to get completely out of control, now we have a shooting incident. Now we have Kelsey shot. Kelsey Fitzsimmons was shot. And now she's in jail. And she's still going to file. Now on top of filing a battle for her child, she's still going to do medical stuff now because she's trying to recover from being shot. She's still going to take on firearms assault charges throughout all of this. This all could have been simply handled by a police department that knew what they were doing. And there's nobody that can disagree with me. I'm sorry. If I'm chief of police in that program, of that department, I'm watching this program right now, I'm like, yeah, hell yeah. I'm ashamed of my officers. I am outraged at my officers. Or anybody that's higher than the chief of police. I'm ashamed. I can't believe the cops did this. You don't ever allow a situation to escalate like that when you're serving an order. You don't ever do that. You secure the firearms. You secure the scene. You eliminate any chances of any level of this ever happening. I mean, you're serving a restraining order. You're taking a baby away from its mother. You guys are fellow police officers here. You don't think that anything could happen? Firearms should always be secured first, because they could lead to a potential situation in the situation. You don't want anything to happen. And sure enough, the situation, Kelsey with postpartum depression pulled her firearm, pulled it on herself, and look what happened. And Kelsey could have been shot and killed, for goodness sakes. And if Kelsey may have shot and killed Noonan, and whether Noonan you think is a good guy, bad guy, or whether he's a good guy, bad guy, indifferent, he could have potentially been shot and killed. Then the police department would have lost one of their own officers because they failed to secure the scene. It's just, this is all because the more and more I learn about this case, maybe I'm just having an epiphany right now on this show that I haven't had about this case before. Maybe it's just becoming clearer to me more now than ever as I learn more and more about this. It just all comes down to securing the firearms. This whole thing, I'm going to say 10 more times in this show. This could have avoided every single situation. It could have avoided every single situation. They could have had everybody protected. You protect everybody. You secure everybody. You make sure everybody is safe. And then once they're safe, that's it. Everybody's safe. Everybody's secure. We're gonna take the kid. We're gonna pack the clothes. We're gonna pack the bottles. We're gonna get everybody out of here, and then that's it. Everybody's safe. Everybody's secure. And whether you agree with Justin and his mother being allowed in there, they're safe, they're secure. There's a peaceful transfer of the child, regardless of whether or not we agree with it, and everybody's safe. And that's what's important, is safety. And as police officers, you need to maintain law and order and safety. Whether or not we agree with the situation between Justin and Kelsey, whether or not we agree with the RO, it doesn't matter. It's about safety of people. And Kelsey Fitzsimmons in this situation, through postpartum depression, was very fired up and very reactionary to the situation. It's an emotional situation. You were taking a baby away from the mother. And that's why this police department had a responsibility to protect everyone in this situation, to ensure that this went down as smoothly as possible, despite the circumstances, which were quite intense. And that's what bothers me the most about this, is that this is completely an avoidable situation, and they should have avoided it, and they could have avoided it. And it's very upsetting that we're having to talk about this story as a result of it. All right. Judge McCarthy issued a written order on September 11, 2025. Before it was docketed, the court defendant filed a motion to reconsider, asking the court to release the defendant and order alcohol urine screens at a private facility. The defendant supported the motion to reconsider with an attached email from probation officer January from September 10, 2025, in which he had responded that the only alternative to scram testing was urine screens at a probation vendor. So here you have good information here. Let's read it again. The defendant supported the motion to reconsider with an attached email from the probation officer, which has the only alternative to scram testing was urine test. So there's your alternative. He suggests urine screens at a probation vendor. So it's workable because, again, she's allowed to go to medical appointments or legal appointments, right? Anything legal, medically related, she's allowed to leave her house with 48 hours notice. Why can't the judge just simply allow urine testing at a probation facility, as suggested by probation officer January here, to do that? Come on. There's alternatives. In a 5-page written decision, Judge McCarthy denied the motion to reconsider, finding that there is nothing in the motion that was not known to the defendant or her counsel when this matter was last before the court on September 11, 2025. There has been no change in circumstances or newly discovered information that would warrant revising the court's decision pursuant to. The court reasonably concluded that the defendants Here it comes. Failure to transparently provide information related to her ability and willingness to abide by the conditions imposed despite 3 lengthy hearings is a manipulation of the court's efforts to fashion the least restrictive conditions of release. Judge McCarthy noted the defendant's deliberate decision not to present the alternative urine testing through a private vendor through her testimony officer. So now it seems to me that the burden, again, is being placed on counsel here or the defendant, that they should have, they should have said, they should have presented the alternative urine testing through a private vendor to them. Yeah, it just come on. At the hearing on September 11th, the court gave the parties ample opportunity to present their arguments. Mr. January was present and testified under oath. For some reason, rather than bringing the alternative testing to the court's attention and inquiring about it with Mr. January during his testimony before the court, defense counsel at that time sought only an order completely relieving the defendant of the condition of release requiring her to submit to scram monitoring. All right. Petition for relief pursuant to, on October 3rd, 2025, the defendant petitioned this court pursuant to the Commonwealth opposed, and on October 15th, the single justice found that Judge McCarthy did not abuse her discretion or commit an error of the law. Like I said, I can't necessarily argue about the law, but I will argue about the discretion. Is that I feel like this judge could have just gone with alternatives and said, there's really no need. I think the judge. I don't know if, like I said, I don't know if this judge is corrupt or overly analytical, but I just feel like the judge overmeasured, and that's where I argue and counter about the judge abusing her discretion. Is that I think this judge overdid it. I think this judge could have allowed for house arrest with GPS monitoring and a blood or urine test at an approved facility or whatever they wanted to do. And they allowed medical and legal transport to go where she needed to go with 48 hours notice to those locations. So why is this such a big deal? Why is she in jail? And that's my biggest argument with this judge right now is why is she in jail? Why don't you just allow for her to live in her house under GPS monitoring? Worst case. All right. So the judge, about the judge's error here, alleged error. Contrary to the suggestion in the petition, the judge did not revoke the defendant's bail pursuant to the last sentence of second par on the motion of defendant. The court reconsidered the bail order and concluded that because of a change in circumstance that had arisen, the defendant's inability to comply without intense pain with in-home scram alcohol monitoring, a condition of release that the court viewed for reasons stated in the court's order as critical to reasonably assure the safety of another person and the community if the defendant were to be released on home confinement. No conditions would reasonably assure the safety of the named person and the community. As the Commonwealth notes, nothing prevents the defendant from requesting relief pursuant to the same provision if and when the defendant can make a showing that information exists that was not known at the time of the hearing or that there has been a change in circumstances and that such information or change in circumstances has a material bearing on the issue of whether there are any conditions of release that will reasonably assure the safety of any other person or the community. So I just say, again, I think the GPS monitoring was sufficient in this situation. But I think, again, I just think that the scram device was overly allowed. And it also seems to me that, did this judge not allow Kelsey the option to continue using the scram device, even if she was, so I say, for example, if Kelsey is unable to do the test without pain, I mean, ultimately, Kelsey was able to do it, right? She was able to actually complete these tests, right? So she did not fail to take those tests. She struggled to complete those tests. She struggled with it. So technically, she could have gone home that day and every day up through now and still done those tests, struggled, gotten pain, lightheaded, all that stuff. She could have done that at home. But the judge doesn't give her that option to say, well, do you just want to go home and continue to struggle with this or what? She didn't even give her that option. It's just, you're going back to jail. Rather than seek relief in the Superior Court as suggested by the single justice, the defendant filed a notice of appeal. I don't blame him for going to the SJC on this stuff. The defendant filed a notice of appeal pursuant to SJC Rule 221 on October 20, 2025, and the matter entered in this court on October 27, 2025. The court ordered full briefing on November 4th, 2025. I'm going to grab some water here. One moment. Argument. Judge McCarthy did not abuse her discretion or commit an error of law in finding the defendant dangerous and mandating conditions of release, where she appropriately considered the defendant's actions in pointing a loaded firearm at a fellow officer and pulling the trigger, coupled with an admitted history of mental illness and persistent alcohol abuse. So, again, there's no mention. They keep saying mental illness throughout all of this, a history of mental illness. I'd like to know where that's documented. I'd like to know more about that, because all I really see is postpartum depression related matters. So they keep saying history of mental illness as if she's a total whack job. But they're not mentioning postpartum depression. They're not mentioning any of that at all. None of that is being discussed in this. None of this is being mentioned. And persistent alcohol abuse. I'd like to know about her DUI violations. Has she had any out? Has she ever been pulled over for drinking and driving? I don't believe so. When a party appeals from an adverse judgment by the single justice under review the single justice's order for clear error of law or abuse of discretion. Whereas here, the single justice did not exercise his discretion to consider the matter de novo, this court focuses its attention on his legal ruling that the bail judge did not abuse his discretion. This court reviews this legal ruling independently to determine whether it is erroneous without giving deference to the single justice's decision. In effect, this means that this court must address the same legal issue presented to the single justice, whether the bail judge's decision to deny the defendant's bail request involved an abuse of discretion or error of law. One second here. I want to read this footnote. 10 weeks have passed since the defendant was remanded to custody, and it is incredible to believe that her medical condition has not improved so that she would be able to breathe adequately into the scram device. Fair enough. But rather than file a motion to reconsider, as suggested by the Commonwealth and single justice, defense counsel chose to utilize a somewhat protracted appellate process, perhaps to garner additional publicity and sympathy for his clients. They're basically taking a shot at Bradel here. He's trying to get sympathy. They're trying to get, publicity. So they're taking on the public like ourselves. They're saying, oh, you should have just gone to the single justice. Whether or not he should have, he still has the right to go to the SJC on them. It's like they're almost upset he went to the SJC. He could have just been, the Commonwealth suggested you could have just, gone whatever. Unreal. All right. This is citing another law, Vasquez versus Commonwealth. However, where the bail judge's decision involved an exercise of discretion, this court must accord its great deference. And this court will not overturn his decision for abuse of discretion because this court would have reached a different result. Cite C. Campbell versus Commonwealth. The defense claimed that the single justice was required to conduct a de novo review of the bail judge's determination is wrong, and the cases she cited do not support that claim. We must decide whether the single justice committed an error of law or abused her discretion in concluding that the single justice of the appeals court committed an error of law and abused his discretion in affirming the judge's denial of the motion to impound. Continues here, recognizing that while the single justice has the power to consider that matter anew in the ordinary case, it is the practice of the single justice to review the matter only with reference to errors of law, and requiring de novo review by a single justice would lead to the absurd and unworkable result of permitting every 58A decision to be heard anew by a single justice. But in any event, the defendant did not submit evident exhibits considered by Judge McCarthy in support of in support of the 58A to the single justice even more. All right. It's just a lot of, just a lot of back and forth here. Disagreement between the defense counsel and otherwise the Commonwealth / judge. Judge McCarthy appropriately weighed the necessary factors when finding the defendant dangerous. I think that the judge can always make an argument as to why someone's dangerous. I just feel like the judge's decision was overly done. Especially when you have doctors that work in psychiatry that have said she's good to go and not a threat to anybody. I mean, when it comes to psychological threats, in terms of the psychosis of somebody or psychological state of somebody, the doctors know better than a judge would in this situation. They're the experts. The government has a paramount interest in protecting its citizens, which is served by the pretrial detention regime. Specifically, the dangerousness statute seeks systematically to identify those who may be present. Come on, clear and present danger. Seeks systematically to identify those who may present a danger to society and to incapacitate them before that danger may be realized. Pretrial detention is warranted if the judge finds by clear and convincing evidence that no conditions of release will reasonably assure the safety of any other person or the community. Well, she's kind of afraid that Kelsey's a threat to the police department in retaliation. When, again, why didn't the police department secure those firearms? 1 second. Wrong damn tube. Live on air. One of their arguments for securing her in jail is that she's a threat to the police department. Retaliation. Kelsey said she doesn't have any beef with Noonan, right? And they're going to say, well, she's a potential threat, so we got to lock her up. Again, this goes back on the police department not securing that situation first. Yeah, here we go. The problem with the courts is they always craft an argument to police itself and justify its bad actions. Yeah, I agree, JC. All right, safety of the community goes there. All right. The lower court's decision to detain an individual pursuant to 58A is reviewed by this court for an abuse of discretion or error of law. This is reviewing the decision. In the full court, review is more strictly limited to errors of law. An abuse of discretion occurs when a judge made a clear error of judgment in weighing the factors relevant to the decision such that the decision falls outside of the range of reasonable alternatives. Well, that's what I mean. I think that the judge did not consider or implement, because like Bradel argued, this is just simply about a change. We're just trying to get off the scram test. We're trying to do blood or alcohol, blood or urine for alcohol-related testing. And I don't think the judge really considered those reasonable alternatives. And I don't know if that judge just did not want her traveling every day. I don't know if the judge spoke about that. I don't know, but it just seems like more could have been done. The finding of dangerousness. Here, no error of law or abuse of discretion has been established. As an initial matter, Judge McCarthy reasonably concluded that the defendant was a danger on August 28, 2025. With respect to the facts of the charged offense, from the outset, the defendant lied about the location of her guns. Now, here we go. This is what I want to talk about right here. This was the part I was thinking about earlier when I read this earlier this morning. With respect to the facts of the charged offense, from the outset, the defendant lied about the location of her guns. Now, number one, that statement right there is a he said, she said argument. Who informed this judge? Who informed who that the defendant lied about the location of her guns? Did Kelsey ever at any point, in fact, mention that the location of her guns or firearms? You know, that's what I'm saying. They're saying that Kelsey lied about the location. They're saying that Kelsey said they were in the basement. But I'm asking, what is the absolute factual documentation and verification that Kelsey had admitted when asked that those firearms were in that basement location? Thank you so much. I appreciate it, Melissa. I like this comment. You were built for this. Godspeed. And thank you so much for your continued advocacy and fundraising. Thank you. We're looking at another fundraiser probably next week. They're saying that's because they have no body cams. Well, this is another argument that needs to be made here. Common Sense Investigator has been following this case and a lot of shows involving this case for quite some time now. And it's the body cam argument. The body cam argument's huge because the body cam argument will tell us exactly, they'll be on camera. Miss Fitzsimmons, where are your firearms located? They're located in my basement. Or, Miss Fitzsimmons, where are the firearms located? They're located on my bedroom. You know what I'm saying? And I'll say this, statistically speaking, and logistically speaking, it doesn't make any sense to keep all your firearms in the basement. Because, so think about this. If the bedroom's located on the second floor and a home intruder breaks in on your first floor, your firearms are located in your basement. That does not logistically make any sense, right? So you're sleeping at night, you're in bed, and your home gets broken into. And the intruder breaks in on the first floor because they're not going to really maybe climb through the basement, or maybe the basement. I would say first floor, then the basement, then second floor are the most likely locations of a break-in. Let's say a violent home intruder breaks into your home and you're a firearms owner, okay? Why would anybody in their right mind? And this is why I don't really believe Kelsey said that her firearms were located in her basement. I believe some of her, I don't know how many firearms she had, but let's say she had 2. I would buy that maybe one firearm was located in the basement. But I would not buy that all of her firearms were located in the basement. Because as evidenced by what happened when the showdown between Noonan and Kelsey happened and Kelsey pulled the firearm, she pulled the firearm in her bedroom. Why would anyone that's a firearms owner keep all their firearms in the basement? If a home intruder breaks in, hypothetically on the first floor, you're going to need your firearm on the same floor, more than likely in the same room where you spend most of your time. And most people sleep 8 hours a night or 6 to 10 hours a night, depending on what your life is like. So the firearm, if she had one of them, would more than likely be in the top floor, in the bedroom, or on the same floor, in a closet or somewhere. She's not going to have them in the basement. I mean, come on. It's just, this is what makes me believe that what I'm saying is that they're making it seem like she said they're all there. I mean, most people will probably have them on the same floor as themselves, but if they have more than one, they might have it on different levels of the house. So say like they're in their basement and a home intruder breaks into the first floor. Okay, you have it there. I don't know if anybody has them on their first floor. I don't know how people do this. I'm just saying, speculating here, is that obviously that firearm was in her bedroom. They're saying she lied about the location. I doubt she did. I'm wondering if these officers made this up afterwards is what I'm getting at. And if she truly did say that, I want to know where it's written, where the officers say that they searched the basement. There's a mention of one of the officers going to the basement with Justin, but there's no mention of the firearms being, like, they don't say anywhere that, like, you notice that it never says, like, the officers went down into the basement, found no firearms. It just says they had an incident in the bedroom, and then there was an exchange of firearms in terms of combatively. It doesn't, I don't know. It just seems far-fetched. She lied about the location of her guns. It's pluralized. That's pluralized. But it doesn't simplistically tell us that, did she in fact also have, like, for example, okay, she had a gun in the bedroom, but did she have another gun in a gun safe in the basement? It doesn't specify that. All right. An apparent attempt to lull the officers into a false sense of security. Okay, now, this is, I have an issue with this. She lied about the location of her guns in an apparent attempt to lull the officers into a false sense of security. That's bullshit. And I'm going to tell you why that is bullshit. Because the officers, regardless of whatever, we talked about this before, we'll say it 100 more times. I'm going to repeat myself 100 times. I don't care, because this stuff can't be said enough. Why is they are putting the burden on Kelsey telling the truth, as opposed to tell us where they are, and the officers locating them first and removing them or securing them. They're saying, well, we walked in the house Kelsey, where are the firearms? They're in the basement in the safe. Oh, by the way, here's one in my bedroom. Surprise! No. No. That officer should never be lulled into a false sense of security, ever. Because if they are trained professionals, which they are trained, they are officers, they wear a badge, they went to the academy, right? They would know to secure the firearms. Let's go to the basement. Okay, Kelsey, we were just in your basement. There's no safe. Where are you keeping your firearms, Kelsey? That should have been the mood. This is why I don't believe that Kelsey lied about this. This is why I don't believe she said they were in that basement. Because these officers obviously would have gone down, unless they're just not thinking. I don't know. But it just doesn't make sense to me. This whole thing is very convoluted. It makes me think that they almost never even thought. It almost makes me seem like they went in there trying to secure the child first. And they were just going to collect the firearms as they went. That kind of seems how this went to me. It just seems like, okay, let's get the child secure. Let's get the bottles, get the diapers, get whatever we need. Let's get the child out of here first, then we'll find the firearms second. That kind of seems to be the pattern here. And I don't even know if they ever asked her where they were. And these officers, for their own protection, should never be walking around someone's house without first securing those firearms. And if they're told by the person who owns that house or lives in that house where they are, and they're unable to find them in that location, that's a major situation now. You know what I'm saying? That's where you probably secure the person in handcuffs, I'm guessing. You probably put the cuffs on them and say, we're going to hold you or detain you or whatever. You've lied about with the location. They're not there. We're going to maybe cuff you. Tell us, because that's another thing. Come on. It's just, I don't know what the procedures are, but I'm just going to say I'd have to imagine that the procedure would be identifying where the firearms were first. And I find it hard to believe Kelsey would just lie about that. She then pointed a loaded firearm at a fellow officer, pulled the trigger, and repeatedly attempted to load more bullets into the weapon when the first shot did not fire. How did she accomplish to do all that in the moment it took the opposing officer time to simply pull his gun from his holster? So she aimed the firearm, pulled the trigger, it jammed. Then she attempted to load more bullets. That doesn't take a split second. That time frame is a little bit too short there. The nature of the offense, combined with the defendant's recent history of violence against the father of her child and threats to the safety of her own child, further support the determination that the defendant is a danger to the community. The violence against the father of the child or alleged is only physical, from what I understand. Anytime she was drinking alcohol, it was physical threats. So they're trying to say, like, her history of violence is the difference between physical violence and violence with a firearm. So that's why I think that the judge is over-assessing the situation here. And threats to the safety of her own child further support the determination that the defendant is a danger to the community. As Judge McCarthy noted, a probate court judge found that there was a substantial likelihood of immediate danger or abuse of the child's father. Well, that's why, if that's the concern, that's why the house arrest is justified. If that's what the judge wants to rule, I guess that's what they're going to rule. But this does not have anything to do with blood alcohol tests. This doesn't have anything to do with scram tests, blood tests, alcohol tests. It has nothing to do with any of that. You know? So that's my argument against her being in jail right now. She's in jail for inability to take the scram test without pain. Not because of whatever additional reasons that are being cited here. Furthermore, Judge McCarthy recognized that the defendant had a history of mental illness. Well, it's really postpartum depression. Justin wrote that she had been recently sectioned by Lawrence General Hospital, and the defense acknowledged the history of postpartum. There we go. But it's the defense, though. And the defense acknowledged the history of postpartum depression and suicidal, let's say suicide. I'm having trouble with those words for some reason today. Suicidality. Okay, didn't come out too well. Didn't roll off the tongue as smoothly as I hope. Among factors the court may consider among 58A are the nature and seriousness of the danger posed to any person or the community that would result from the person's release and the defendant's history of mental illness. The defense appears to argue that she is entitled to differential treatment because she was a sworn law enforcement officer from two different Essex County Essex County agencies and had passed many hurdles to becoming a police officer. However, Judge McCarthy was not required to give the former police officer, she's still a current police officer from my understanding, give the police officer special treatment where the facts suggest that rather than acting swiftly and without compassion, 3 of her colleagues gave the defendant the benefit of the doubt when they entered the home and asked where the guns were located. The defendant betrayed her fellow officers and lied to them. She said they were in the basement. Well, again, I want to know if those officers went in that basement. That's what I want to know. Did they go down there? Given these circumstances, Judge McCarthy properly found by clear and convincing evidence that no condition of release will reasonably assure the safety of any person or community. Some stuff about psychiatric hospitals, drug defensive. The scram conditions of release. Rather than hold the defendant in custody, the court sought to fashion the least restrictive conditions of release that would reasonably assure her appearance and the safety of all other people in the community as required by such and such. Most importantly here, the court ordered the defendant to submit to scram monitoring despite the defendant's cavalier approach to removal of the condition. What a comment that is there. And her persistent view that the incident had nothing whatsoever to do with alcohol. It did not. It did not. Was she intoxicated? Judge McCarthy justifiably found that monitoring the defendant for alcohol use with the scram device was critical to the court's decision to release her on conditions. The precipitating events over the weekend of June 28, 2025 that caused Justin to obtain a restraining order were fueled by alcohol. He reported, again, this firearms-based circumstance that played out is because the cops didn't secure the firearms. If she had told, let's say the officers, let's just say this. Let's say hypothetically the officers went in the house. Kelsey, where are the firearms? Kelsey says they're in the basement. They go in the basement. They don't find them. Well, what next? What is the next step of the officers next? The next step is to find out where they are. She lied to them. You lied to us. Why continue to move her around the house? Why take her to the first floor, the second floor, all this stuff? If they're not in the basement, the question mark should go over your head. Where are they? So they keep trying to say it's on Kelsey, but it's really the officers that should have secured them by any means necessary before moving forward, especially moving Kelsey around floor to floor. You have to see, this is not about Kelsey individually when I say this. This is about any person in the circumstance that is having their house searched for firearms or having firearms turned in. You need to make sure the house is secure. And then the alcohol argument. They just keep going back to that. Alcohol. It's just, come on. He reported that the defendant was heavily intoxicated at the time. This is going back to June. And that she refused his request to stop drinking. The defendant's childhood friend corroborated that the defendant had been drinking on June 28th. Wow, people were drinking alcohol. And that her actions that night were erratic and violent. The friend further stated that, and again, this is all he said, she said. It's all he said, she said. There's no documentation that she assaulted anybody. Was there any police records citing this? There's nothing on that at all. Nothing. It's all he said, she said. All right. The friend further stated that the defendant had struggled with mental health issues, aggression, and alcohol abuse previously. Again, he said, she said. Finally, the defendant even has out-of-state criminal charges from 2018 that reflect issues with alcohol, intoxicated and disruptive. I mean, I'll be honest, that's not a rare charge. I mean, that's not a rare charge exactly. I don't want to justify it, but I heard somebody bring this up. I think this was the New Hampshire related incident. But I mean, people do drink alcohol. How many people have been at concerts and they drink too much alcohol one night and go to a bachelorette party or bachelor party and get a little rowdy one night? All I'm saying is that it happens. I'm not saying it's necessarily a reflection that Kelsey, because it just kind of seems to me that they're trying to make out Kelsey to be more of a monster or a monster in general. Then I just think the measurables on this are a little bit egregious. I think they're they're taking certain situations. Well, she drank then, and during this particular incident, she did this, or she was intoxicated and disruptive. And this is also when she's younger. And also, I should note, this did not prohibit her from becoming a police officer, right? This did not stop her from becoming a police officer at all. So it must have not have been that bad. Where alcohol is so clearly intertwined with the defendant's ability to control her behavior. Well, again, if she's such an alcoholic, what about her history of drinking alcohol while she's been a cop? Any on-duty situations ever happen? Has she ever drinking too much on the job? I mean, there was an officer recently that was on video in another town that was drunk, heavily intoxicated. Yeah, that's right. It is being held against her almost in a double jeopardy sense. They're citing older stuff. Exactly. Clearly intertwined with the defendant's ability to control her behavior, the court's insistence on scram monitoring was eminently reasonable. That they're citing previously stuff. Well, in 2018 and blah, blah, blah. And it's just, they're doing everything they can to apply this. Commonwealth not required to demonstrate nexus between dangerousness of charged offenses and danger that accused might have presented if left at large in order to justify pretrial detention. All right, section 3, the motion to remove the scram condition. Here we go. The defendant's motion to relieve her from the scram requirement triggered reconsideration by the court, not revocation pursuant to 58B as claimed by the defendant. Section 58A specifically permits reconsideration of a prior detention order where there has been a material change in circumstances. The hearing may be reopened by the judge per Commonwealth versus Loge at any time before trial if the judge finds that information exists that was not known at the time of the hearing, or that there has been a change in circumstances, and 2, that such information or change in circumstance has a material bearing on the issue of whether there are conditions of release that will reasonably assure the safety of the community. On September 11, 2025, after learning about the intense pain caused by the process of the scram testing, Judge McCarthy became justifiably concerned because she did not intend the condition to be punitive. However, ordering the defendant to remain alcohol-free and monitoring her for alcohol use with a scram device was critical to the court's decision. No shit. Given the evidence supporting imposition of the scram device in the first place, as noted above, Judge McCarthy was well within her discretion to conclude that she could not assure the safety of the community if the defendant's sobriety was not reliably monitored. So let me stop there for a second. Let's look at the big picture. Now, we've argued, this whole thing has been about, as it stands, Kelsey Fitzsimmons is in Chicopee right now, in jail, because of alcohol monitoring, right? This is all about alcohol monitoring, this whole thing, big picture. However, at the end of the day, she is under house arrest with a GPS monitoring device, okay? And I don't know if the judge is looking at it from this perspective, but if she's if she has a GPS ankle bracelet around her ankle, she's not going to be able to exit her home and do whatever potential threat, carry out whatever potential threat that they're worried about her doing if she has a GPS bracelet, because that thing's going to set off after she steps out of her house or a certain distance or whatever, however it's ranged for the house or the yard at least. She's not going to be able to do anything without the GPS monitor tripping off, the cops coming to the house, and apprehending her. So even if, let's say, this is my argument, even if Kelsey Fitzsimmons was under home arrest with the GPS monitoring ankle bracelet and her weapons were seized, exactly, Charlie. Yeah, you know, there's not much she's going to be able to do anyway. So she's really under house arrest. There's not much she's going to be able to do. She's under house arrest. You know, she's under house arrest. What are you going to do? What's she going to do? How is she a threat to the community? You know, firearms were seized, right? I mean, she could be, honestly, I'll put it this way. She could drink 29 bottles of beer on the wall, 29 bottles of beer, take one down, pass them around, 28 bottles of beer on the wall, okay? I mean, she could drink to the highest level while she's got that GPS monitor on. If she does anything out of control, if she decides to run out the front door and run around the front yard, run into the neighbor's lawn, that ankle monitor's going off. And guess what? The cops are showing up. She's being taken back into custody. She's going back to jail. So they keep arguing the alcohol, but the alcohol really doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how much she drinks while she's under GPS home confinement. It's just stuff that defies my mind. I don't understand why the judge is not looking at it from that perspective. Because again, to the upteenth time, there's no DUI charges. There's no, all the alcohol history that's being stated, except for 2018, is he said, she said. In 2018, when that happened, I mean, what is she, 29 now? That's 7 years ago. She was 22. She was college age. I would say if she doesn't have anything in the last 3 to 5 years, it's not really relevant. And the rest of these situations are all he said, she said. That's how I'm looking at this whole thing. It just doesn't make sense. So she can't assure the safety of the community. She's at home. She's got an ankle monitor on. You know, I can't assure the safety of the community if the defendant's sobriety is not reliably monitored. Well, I'm going to say this again. She could drink as much as she wants. She's still got that GPS ankle monitor around her. The defendants claim that Judge McCarthy should be aware of alternative testing options is without evidence in the record. Moreover, Judge McCarthy's concern that the defendant manipulated the process is justifiable. Defense counsel failed to raise any concerns regarding the defendant's ability to breathe deeply in 2 prior hearings and persistently failed to introduce medical evidence to support her claim. Well, I think that the defense will beg to differ on that. Additionally, there is no explanation for defense counsel's failure to question probation officer January about his email from the night before regarding urine testing, or to mention the possibility to the court when given ample opportunity, other than it was a reasoned tactical decision by a seasoned defense attorney seeking to release the defendant from alcohol testing entirely. So this reminds me of Mrs. Doubtfire. I'm sorry, Mr. Hillard, but this just seems to be a very gifted performance by a very gifted actor. They're just basically saying, you know, Brado's just trying to basically throw everything at the wall to see what will stick. And he just wants to try to get her. I mean, but honestly though, I won't even shame if that's what they're, even if that's true, I wouldn't even shame Bradle for trying, even though Bradle didn't. Bradle sought alternative testing. But I wouldn't even shame Bradle for trying to get them removed, arguing that no alcohol-related concerns that were ever documented. And additionally, like you know, she was never, was there an incident where she acted out violently recently in 2025, 2024? No. Well, she was drunk? No, nothing. So, yeah, I would say the GPS ankle monitor was sufficient to secure her in her home while the trial process plays out based on the incident that happened that was gun-related with her pulling a gun on herself. If they want to go with that, you know, I can cry about it all I want, but I think it's a better scenario than the one that Kelsey's in right now. That's my argument. All right. A motion to suppress is not a dry run or a dress rehearsal to come back once an adverse ruling is obtained to try and do it all over again. The claim related to the Americans with Disabilities Act is likewise baseless. So they're throwing this out the window that Bradle made this argument. Well, I mean, she was shot. The defendant cites no federal or state case addressing the intersection of the ADA or 58A. It appears to be an open question whether the ADA applies to dangerousness hearings. They cite a couple of things here. Moreover, contrary to the claim that the defendant has conclusively demonstrated disability, there is a dearth of medical evidence suggesting that the defendant's condition ever qualified her as a disabled person, or that the act of breathing deeply enough to submit a sample for the SCRAM device was akin to an activity of daily living. Well, she's having trouble breathing. She was shot. This came out a few days ago, right around, I think it came out on Thursday. I think the disability thing can be argued. That's just my opinion. Like, I'm not saying I agree with the judge or anything, but I'm just saying that I think that there might be like a means of filing for disability. I would say this. I would say Kelsey's technically disabled, but I don't know if she was like determined as disabled, like a fully disabled person. I don't know enough about that to make a decision. So that might be up in the air. Okay, excellent. Did you tag me in that by any chance? Let me see if you tagged me in that. Just trying to see if you get tag me in that. Do me a favor, just tag me in that if you got it. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Can you do me a favor? Can you just include, like, if your X name doesn't say Kyle or Sharky, can you just include your name, like, on your title, like, hey, Mazza from Kyle or something? Thanks. Appreciate it. I'll take a look into that. So, yeah, the disability thing can be argued, but I still think that she was physically unable to do it nonetheless. Thanks, Kyle. And finally, as noted above, the defendant strategically elected not to present evidence of any reasonable accommodation that would obtain the same objective as the scram device. Oh, my Lord. In sum, Judge McCarthy acted prudently and deliberately in considering the Commonwealth's request for detention. She considered the evidence presented and made multiple supportable oral and written findings, resorting to detention as a last resort. Well, that's where I disagree. I think that they could have offered her alternative testing. Charlie just came in. Thank you, Charlie. Per ADA, a physical or mental, oh, this is nice. A physical or mental impairment that substantially limits one or more major life activities: walking, speaking, breathing, concentrating, reading. Okay. And that would equal to, thank you, Kyle. That would equal to disability, is what you're saying. Thank you so much, Kyle. I see you now. Okay, perfect. All right, perfect. All right, this just came out. I'm going to open this up. I'm not going to present this yet, but let me open it up. I'm going to get this set up for later in the show so I can read through this. Kyle, thanks again. Thanks for making me aware of this. This is what's so good about our community, is we always keep each other well informed. So it's 4 pages in all. Okay, I see the 4th page, 3rd and 4th pages now. All right, just getting this all set up for later. And there we go. Okay, perfect. I'll read through that in a little bit. All right, and directly from the ADA's website. And this equates to disability, is what you're saying? A physical or mental impairment that substantially limits one or more major life activities: walking, speaking, breathing, which you emphasized. All right, that's good stuff right there, then. Thank you for the super chat as well, Charlie. Do appreciate it. So if that qualifies as disability, then there you go. Then that's the whole argument right there. So that's, if there's a breathing issue, then that would qualify. Then that's it. That's good news. That's why, Brado obviously knew that. His defense team obviously knew that when they filed for that. Hey, Scott, what's going on? Scott McGinnis is in the house. Hope you guys are doing good today. Saturday afternoon. Kind of chilling. I got some exercise to do. Did a lot of stuff done last night, so I have a nice kickback Saturday today, which is kind of nice. So I'm kind of enjoying it. Kicking back, just talking about this stuff and all that. All right, continuing. And so again, resorting to detention as the last resort, I contend. And the reason why I contend is I feel like she could have allowed other testing means to keep her under home arrest. And I think that would have been good for her. All right, to do that for Kelsey. The defendant has not demonstrated that she made an error of law or abused her discretion. So again, I'm more concerned about the discretion here, because I take that back to this. Resorting to detention as a last resort, I disagree with. So I'm more discretionarily, that's where my argument's always been with the judge, is I think that regardless of the law and the legality of all of it, it can go a couple different ways, but I think discretion trumps the law decision-making, in my opinion. That's just those are my thoughts on it. All right. This is a footnote here. Let's read through this. Bullet fragments could cause chronic pain that can be exacerbated by movement such as deep breathing. They say the defendant's claim that she has severely diminished lung capacity is unsupported on the record. Skip the rest of our conclusion. And then just basically say, for conclusion, for the foregoing reasons, the court should affirm the single justice's finding that the motion judge did not abuse her discretion. I disagree. Or commit an error of law. I don't necessarily think maybe an error of law as much as a full examination of the law to make a better decision. That's kind of where I'm looking at that, because I just don't think that the judge has done right in this situation. And the rest of it's just smaller stuff here. And that's it. All right. So Kyle has helped me out here. My associate, Kyle Sharkey, Jim Carrey. My associate, Dan Marino. Let's get this to 200. Let's go up to 250. Let me just get these. Oh, these are all pre-zoomed now. Good. All right. Let's take a look at what we got here. Moving right along. Hey, Kyle, when was this released? When did this come out? Was this just dropped today? Maybe I got to check your post. CW versus Kelsey Fitzsimmons. Defendant Kelsey Fitzsimmons motion for specific discovery. I'm going to share this to my page too. All right, that's done. One moment. Transitioning here. Let's see if Kyle responded. Friday. Okay, so this came out yesterday. All right, thank you. All right, thank you so much for that. All right, transitioning to this. All right, Commonwealth of Massachusetts versus Kelsey Fitzsimmons, filed yesterday. Defendant, I couldn't find the date on it. That's why I kept asking. Defendant Kelsey Fitzsimmons motion for specific discovery. Now comes Miss Kelsey Fitzsimmons by and through undersigned counsel and respectfully requests that the court order the Commonwealth to provide the following specific discovery. 1. All evidence of promises, rewards, inducements given or offered to any civilian witness, including but not limited to all of the names listed. That includes Justin's listed as well. Okay. All right. Number 2, all statements of any witness known to the Commonwealth, regardless of whether they are intended to be called in the case, including but not limited to those contained in grand jury minutes, text messages, whether on department or personal cell phones, emails, voicemails, notes, writings, and the like, made by, between, among any and all officers. This is good shit. Oh, this is good. This is what you need, because this is getting us back to what happened with Michael Proctor now. Is if you start to see a scenario play out now where these officers had any kind of communication among themselves, and said certain things, that if this comes out, and text messages come out saying, hey, you shouldn't have shot her, or, at least we got this all swept under the rug, at least. Now all of a sudden you could be you see some of these officers in Michael Proctor situations. If they talked about certain things, any communications that came out. So this could be an absolute treasure trove of information, because they're asking for all this stuff now. Whether on department or personal cell phones, including emails, voicemails, notes, writings, between or among any all. This is the standard stuff that they're asking for, but it's great because it tells you everything. If there's anything on those text messages or emails at all that suggests, like if someone says to comment, hey man, she pulled the gun on herself. If they say anything like that, anything that alludes to a conspiracy, a cover-up, a frame job, that comes out in those texts, that's big time for Kelsey and her defense team. Defendant requests the same information from any further witnesses directing or managing or otherwise involved in the police response and investigation, whether intended to be called or not by the Commonwealth, who were not physically present at the incident at the location in June. Corey records, current addresses, phone numbers, date of birth, yeah. Any and all footage, here we go. Any and all video footage from the North Andover Police Department on June 30th, 2025, during the time in which Miss Fitzsimmons was at the station for her CPR, switching tabs, recertification, the names and contact information of any officers that interacted with or observed Miss Fitzsimmons at that time. 5, any and all training records for Lieutenant Sean Daly, Timothy Houston, and Officer Patrick Noonan. Interesting about the training. I'm wondering if, are they concerned about what they could try to get out of that? What would be the concern there? Were they trained up on all procedures? Because they might make an argument. They might make an argument that I made earlier in the show, perhaps. Maybe they might try to argue, her defense team, that were or were not these officers trained in how to secure firearms when entering someone's home when they were seizing firearms? Did or did not those officers conduct that carry out that. I think that could be a great argument. I think that could be a great argument in trial. Is you argue that the officers, were they certified in securing firearms? Did they do that in this house? Yeah, because they're saying they were told they were in the basement, but they weren't. And if they went in the basement and looked and didn't find it, why did they continue to escort Kelsey throughout her home on the first floor and second floor or whatever? Why did they continue to do that if they hadn't first secured that? If that's a procedure, if that's a part of their training when they're at the academy or wherever, and they don't carry that out during this home situation, then that could be a big statement to make in court. Because they're, like I said, they would have put people in danger. They put Kelsey in danger. They put their own officers in danger. They put Justin and his mother in danger, and they put the baby in danger. They put a lot of people in danger because they left it up to Kelsey's response to a situation. If she has postpartum depression, in this situation, she turned a gun on herself, which would have been a threat to herself, then it becomes a threat for everybody. So it's not a good situation. All right. Any and all disciplinary records for any officer or firefighter who responded to the address or to Mass General Hospital on or after June 30th. Complete disciplinary and training records for Officer Patrick Noonan from the police department while he was at not only North Andover, but Lawrence Police Department. Complete personnel file for Kelsey Fitzsimmons. This is a good one, too. So they're really digging into, what's Noonan's history like? Then they're kind of going after Kelsey. This is to prove that, looking at what Noonan's record is he good, bad, or indifferent? Does he have any inconsistencies as an officer in terms of how he conducts himself? I don't mean like behavior-wise, but maybe like procedure-wise. And then Kelsey, same thing. Any documents reflecting any complaints or demands for any type of relief made by Fitzsimmons against the department or in relation to her employment at the North Andover Police Department, because that takes you back to what happened with some other female officers that are suing that police department. They had some issues, and maybe they're trying to dig in to see or get records of any documents that reflects that she made any complaints. So that's good. 9, all statements, including text, emails, voicemails, writings, and the like between or among any civilian witness, police or prosecutors, and Justin and many others, or a written summary of the statement pursuant to Rule 14. Number 10, any and all information relative to any witness officer being placed on a Brady list. And that's interesting. Any and all information relative to any witness officer being placed on a Brady list for alleged misconduct and any prior instances of police misconduct. That's very interesting. Any and all phone records from all witness officers, including Chief Gray, and then a whole bunch of officers here, via phone extraction and not screenshots for communications relative to Officer Kelsey Fitzsimmons and or the incident that I ordered. You know what I'm forgetting? I'm forgetting if Chief Gray was there at this. Was he or was he not? That's the one piece I'm forgetting today. I just have something I never focused on. That little piece I'm forgetting. So on not screenshots for communications via phone extraction and not screenshots for communications relative to Officer Kelly Fitzsimmons and or the incident that occurred on June 30th. Any and all police reports, log notes, radio communications, 911 calls, or written communications related to any calls for service at 125 Phillips Brooks Road from November 24th through present, including the incident that is the basis for the charge in this case. 13, any and all text messages, voicemails, notes, or emails between any responding officers and Justin for the last 2 years. Interesting. Maybe that's to see if there's any kind of level of coordination. Okay. Number 14, any and all documents related to any trainings relative to the use of force, domestic calls, mental health related calls, service of restraining orders, and taking custody of children that any witness officer has attended. Okay, that's good. That's good as well. Okay, so any documents related to training. Yeah. That's good stuff right there. They want to know what kind of training those officers had. Yep. Services of ROs, domestic calls, and taking custody of any children that any witness officer has attended. A list of any such trainings offered or conducted by the North Andover Police Department, regardless of whether or not responding officers attended such trainings for the last 7 years. Any and all policies and procedures of the North Andover Police Department relating to any of the aforementioned categories. That's interesting. I like that. That's good. It's good that they kind of want to get a good background on these officers to know how they carry themselves. All right, a complete copy of the surveillance hard drive seized from the home of the defendant by Massachusetts State Police defense team will provide a blank hard drive disk to the Essex County DA's office on or before November 25th, 2025, which of course is the next trial hearing date. Or hearing date. All other Rule 14 automatic discovery and exculpatory evidence not already requested, such as search warrants, radio transmissions, 911 calls, reports, statements, video, diagrams, police logs, photos, surveillance footage, and the like, an opportunity to inspect all physical evidence and potential exhibits in the case, any and all information responsive to the defendant's arraignment discovery motions filed and served on August 26, 2025. Such information is relevant and exculpatory and mandatory discovery under Rule 14 of the Massachusetts Rules of Criminal Procedure. Ms. Simmons relies on Brady versus Maryland, Kyles versus Whitley, Commonwealth versus Judith, Weary versus Kane. Let's skip all this. And all applicable Commonwealth and federal constitutional and statutory guarantees. Signed yesterday. There it is. Signed yesterday, Tim Bradle and Martha Coakley, respectively, submitted by Kelsey Fitzsimmons. And this is the certificate of service signed by Tim Bradle. All right. Well, a lot of stuff there. A lot of stuff to cover there. That's interesting. We're going to work on another fundraiser for her probably next Sunday. And we'll see what we can do for a fundraiser there for her to get that going. I'm thinking maybe bi-weekly fundraisers. Getting a lot of people together to do a show can be a little bit enduring. You always got to reach out to a lot of people, so it's a lot of coordinating. It's always easy to do a show by yourself because you're just like, okay, I just turn the camera on and I'm good to go. But yeah, that's a lot of stuff. But let's see what Kyle Sharkey said here. The bigger question, though, hypothetically, the timing, were certain items on the CW appendix not turned over to Tim yet? Well, that's what I wonder too about information given to the defense team. We saw it in the Karen Reed trial a lot, where a lot of information was not turned over, and they had to continue to fight for information, which always seemed to be an issue, and I'm hoping that's not the same thing here, because we want to give Kelsey the same opportunity to, compete for her freedom, and have an opportunity to get that opportunity to say, hey, this isn't what it seems. There's more to it. And the truth will come out, as she said herself, as she was quoted. And Kelsey's GiveSendGo Defense Fund is pinned at the top of the chat. It's also right there. I just linked it. GiveSendGo.com. Help Kelsey heal. You can donate to her, help her out with varying matters from defense fund, medical-related matters, and everything like that assist her in her efforts to give herself the best opportunity to move forward. And that's what we want for her. We want the best for her. It's just unfortunate. Like I said, I place a lot of the blame here on the judge's discretion and the actions of the North Andover Police Department in properly securing a scene prior to actively having Kelsey move throughout the house. And to me, that's very controversial in my particular opinion. And that's all I have for you guys today. 2.5 hour show. I got some exercise I got to do here. I'm going to have a little bit of a lunch. I haven't had lunch yet, so it's going to be a salad today. And then some exercise, and I'll enjoy my evening as well. But, free Kelsey Fitzsimmons, donate to her, help her out. Subscribe. Please subscribe to the channel. I love to gain subscribers as well. It's always good to see the channel gaining subscribers, just showing that people have a vested interest in the content I put out. It means a lot to me as well to have subscribers and people that tune into my program. So I thank everybody that does. That follows me, listens to my programming, and fights along with me, or I fight along you. You fight along. We fight along together to help Kelsey Fitzsimmons, Karen Reed, and occasionally some other cases I follow. But thank you guys so much. Appreciate it. To Charlie, thanks again for your super chat today. Do appreciate it. You guys have a great afternoon. Patriots are back tomorrow. We're moving on to Cincinnati, and I may be back tomorrow with the Karen Reed show potentially. We'll see. Other than that, guys, take care of yourselves and have a great weekend. From MazzaMedia, I am Mark. I am out of here. Take care, guys. Bye-bye.